Chapter 271. Kamishiro Imperial Garden has always been quiet, except for a few servants and ninjas who are responsible for protecting the family. It's almost impossible to see many people in the huge complex. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. In the ancient wooden corridor, Colored Glazes hurried footsteps from east to west, quickly walking towards her mother Rue Huey's room. Walking in from the side door, Colored Glazes' chaotic thoughts gradually came together, and the expression on her face gradually calmed down. There's no problem, there won't be a problem. If Colored Glaze was very flustered when she suddenly heard the news of Rue Huey's serious illness, then now she has already returned to her previous calm state. Because on the way here, Ryudo already gave his guarantee. He promised that nothing will happen to Lady Rue Hui. Although this guarantee has no basis, for some reason Colored Glaze believed his words. There's no problem, mother won't die. Whether it's blindly following Ryudo or deceiving herself, Colored Glaze believes that mother will live well. But even so, this Kamishiro lady's face was very serious, and there was a trace of anger in it. That's right, it was anger. Colored Glaze rarely showed her anger on the surface, but now she showed such an expression. It's obvious that this matter has reached the point where even she can't hold it in anymore. And so, when the Kanzaki family's eldest daughter stood in front of her mother's bedroom door, she took a deep breath, and then lifted her leg and kicked the door. Facing the wooden door, Colored Glaze angrily used the secret lady door kicking technique that she has used many times before, but has never succeeded. But this time she succeeded. Bang! Accompanied by a muffled sound from the wooden door, Colored Glaze's kick actually directly kicked open the door of Rue Huey's room. The whole process was clean and tidy, without any sloppiness. Although this seemed like a simple action, only Colored Glaze and Ryudo knew that in order to do this lady spent a lot of effort. On a certain day more than 2 months ago, Colored Glaze suddenly found Ryudo. Why can't I kick open the door? Is there a problem with the door? You don't seem to suspect that there's a problem with your foot. I'm just joking, teach me how to kick the door, hurry up. Ever since she kicked the door a few times, Luli had fallen in love with this kind of pretentious method. However, every time she failed to act pretentious, she became a silly pretentious person. So in order to not jump around holding her feet, Colored Glaze followed Ryudo to learn this special skill, lady door kicking technique. Kicking the door was a physical activity, but it wasn't just a physical activity. The angle of the kick, the position of the kick, the body's center of gravity, and so on, there were too many things to pay attention to. It was said that Colored Glaze's physical fitness was like trash, but fortunately, the lady was smart enough, and after some special training, she finally mastered the preliminary technique of kicking. For example, the probability of kicking open a very thin wooden door, like the one in Kamishiro Imperial Garden, was quite high. See, didn't she succeed? Bang! As the bedroom door was kicked open, a woman in her 40s appeared in front of Colored Glaze. She was wearing a face scarf covering her mouth and nose, and she was wearing tight clothes for easy movement. This woman didn't seem to have any special reaction to the lady's action of kicking the door. She just stood there quietly and waited. Ryuki, are you going to stop me too? Colored Glaze naturally knew this woman, because she was the guardian ninja, who was responsible for protecting Rue Hui, Ryuki. Now Colored Glaze didn't have any companions around her, and Ryudo was also fighting with Rabbit Ball outside. If this guardian ninja wanted to stop the lady, then Colored Glaze definitely wouldn't be able to see Rue Hui. However, Ryuki shook her head and said, Master Rue Hui didn't give me an order to stop the lady, so I won't do anything. Really? Very good. After hearing the hint in Ryuki's words, Colored Glaze didn't hesitate to walk past the ninja and walked into the bedroom. At this time, in the deepest part of the secluded bedroom, a woman in a white traditional nightgown was leaning on the bed, turning her head to look at the scenery outside the window. The woman did not seem to be in a good state of mind. Her thick black hair was draped messily behind her back, and her originally heroic face had a sickly look. Compared to the usual powerful, valiant and wise Kanzaki, the current Ruehue seemed incredibly delicate and weak. This huge contrast gave this woman a strange sense of beauty, making her seem even more lovely and moving than usual. Since she suddenly fainted not long ago, and slowly woke up, Rui Hui had been looking outside the window in a daze. Looking out the window from this angle, she could see a lush golden osmanthus bush, which was planted by Rui Hui when Colored Glaze was born. Golden osmanthus was Rui Hui's favorite flower. In the past, when the golden osmanthus outside the room bloomed every year, she would take Colored Glaze to enjoy the flowers and play together. It was just that the golden osmanthus bloomed from late September to early October, which was 2 or 3 months from now. 2 or 3 months. Can I hold on until the next golden osmanthus bloom? Or was it? After waking up, Rui Hui felt empty in her heart. Rui Hui was well aware of her death date, and she had even been working on it for a long time. But when she suddenly fainted today, and when she woke up, she could clearly feel that her body was getting worse and worse. Even a heroine like Rui Hui couldn't help but feel sad for her future. Everyone was afraid of death, especially those who had something to worry about. In other words, Rui Hui wasn't afraid of death, but she was afraid that she wouldn't be able to see Colored Glaze in the future, and that she wouldn't be able to shelter her daughter from the wind and rain. But fortunately, Ryudo was still there. Rui Hui had already instructed Rabbit Ball to inform Ryudo as soon as something happened to her. This way, even if she suddenly died today, with Ryudo's ability, he would be able to help Colored Glaze stabilize the situation. This way, even if she stepped on the road to the Yellow Springs, Rui Hui could go with peace of mind. Tap, tap, tap. However, just as Rui Hui was thinking about this, light footsteps came from the bedroom not far away, and it was obvious that someone was walking over. Was it Ryudo? Because she had already instructed Ryudo to come quickly, Rui Hui turned her head with a smile and said, Ryudo-kun, it seems that Originally, Rui Hui wanted to say, it seems that I'm going to die soon. But halfway through, the master of Kamiyoshi froze on the spot. Because the person who appeared in front of Rui Hui wasn't Ryudo, but a girl who looked 70 to 80% similar to her, with a trace of anger on her delicate and elegant face. Rui Hui never dreamed that the person who appeared here wasn't Ryudo, but her own daughter. So she could only ask as calmly as possible, Lu, Colored Glaze, why are you here? Of course I'm here. Colored Glaze revealed a strange sneer as she walked to her mother's bedside, and said with a smile, otherwise, if something happened to you, I wouldn't even be able to see you for the last time. What happened? I'm just a little tired, nothing special. Liar. Before Rui Hui could finish her lie, Colored Glaze interrupted her mother with a sharp and furious voice. Since young, this was the first time Colored Glaze spoke to her mother in such a tone, or rather roared. After roaring, Colored Glaze suddenly reached out and grabbed Rui Hui's collar, and asked with a trembling voice, in your heart, what am I? Am I still a 3-year-old child? When she saw Colored Glaze's expression, Rui Hui knew that she knew the truth. For a moment, she didn't know how to respond, and could only lower her head in silence. Why do you think that by throwing me far away, and keeping me away from you, I'll feel better when you suddenly disappear one day? As she spoke, Colored Glaze gritted her teeth, and said in a low voice, are you looking down on yourself or on me? Do you think that as long as you're far enough away from me, I won't be sad when you die? Also, what do you think I'm most angry about? It's that dispirited look on your face when you've completely accepted the fact that you're dead. This isn't the mother I know. The Rui Hui Kaneshiro I know won't give up. Even if it's only 1%, 1 in 1,000, or 1 in 10,000. You shouldn't give up. Colored Glaze. I'm sorry, we can't go against fate. This is the fate of us Kamiyoshi, and it's not a problem that can be solved with hard work. After hearing her daughter's words, Rui Hui shook her head slightly. If it was just a normal illness, then there might be a way to cure it. However, Rui Hui's family's hereditary illness was an old illness that had existed for many generations, and it wasn't a problem that the current era's medical technology could solve. The reason why Colored Glaze wasn't infected with such a terminal illness was because she had gone through a special pregnancy process. However, Rui Hui, who was already terminally ill, couldn't be saved. This was an unchangeable fact. However, Colored Glaze laughed coldly and said, "Fate. If this is what you call fate, then I'm going to cut off this ridiculous fate right now." Colored Glaze, can you stop messing around? Can't we talk about something more realistic? Rue Hui instantly felt touched and amused, and she almost couldn't help but laugh. After all, Colored Glaze's current cutting off fate attitude made her seem a little Chinibu, as if she had suddenly turned into a Chinibu girl, and was completely different from the usual young lady. After all, cutting off Rue Hui's fate of dying from a terminal illness wasn't something that could be solved just by shouting a few words. Unless Colored Glaze really did have a way to cut off fate, then the situation would be different. The next moment, the girl waved her hand and took out a small round pill that looked like a translucent pearl from her pocket. It gave off a rich medicinal fragrance, and she handed it to Rue Hui. Chapter 272. This is medicine? The moment she saw the pill, Rue Hui couldn't help but take a deep breath. Although the pill was small, when Colored Glaze took it out of her pocket, the pill emitted a very strong medicinal fragrance. The feeling of this fragrance was hard for Rue Hui to describe with words. It was as if the medicinal fragrance had penetrated into her bone marrow, and all the blood in her body seemed to have been cleansed. With just a sniff, Rue Hui felt that her mental state had an obvious change. This was the first time she had seen such a miraculous medicine in her life. But even so, it didn't mean anything. When the pill was handed to Rue Hui, Colored Glaze said seriously, "Mother, eat this. This pill can cure your illness." "This? What medicine is this?" Rue Hui took the pill and asked with a tone of not knowing whether to laugh or cry. And Colored Glaze also simply replied, "I don't know." "You don't know? Then where did this medicine come from?" "That guy Ryudo gave it to me. He said that after eating it, it can cure your terminal illness, so he asked me to bring it over." "Ryudo? So that's how it is that the case?" When she heard Ryudo's name, Rue Hui suddenly had a feeling of realization. In fact, before this, Rue Hui more or less had some complaints about Ryudo. After all, she repeatedly told him not to tell Colored Glaze about this matter. But Ryudo obviously didn't take her words to heart. After Rue Hui fainted, he even took the initiative to bring Colored Glaze here. But after Colored Glaze took out this so-called miracle medicine that could cure her, Rue Hui seemed to understand Ryudo's meaning. From Rue Hui's point of view, there was no medicine in this world that could cure her with just one bite. So the pill that Ryudo brought over was most likely a lie. Who was it lying to? It was probably used to trick Colored Glaze. From Rue Hui's point of view, Ryudo was probably trying to deceive Colored Glaze by telling her that her mother would recover after taking the medicine. He was trying to make Colored Glaze feel at ease and prepare to inherit the Kamiyoshi clan as soon as possible. Thinking about it carefully, this was the only explanation. It couldn't be that Ryudo also thought that such a small pill could cure an incurable disease, right? Seriously, if you want to put on a show like this, you should at least give me a heads up. You made me flustered. Thinking of this, the corners of Rue Hui's mouth revealed a relaxed smile. Apparently, she understood Ryudo's intention. Thus she smiled and said, Okay. I'll eat, okay?" Since Ryudo planned to put on such a show, to appease Colored Glaze's emotions, Rue Hui naturally wouldn't refuse. She took the pill from her daughter's hand, then picked up the cup of water on the bedside table next to her, and swallowed the very special-looking pill with a mouthful of water. During the whole process of taking the medicine, Colored Glaze's gaze was fixed on her mother, as if she wanted to see something from her. "Okay, you don't have to keep looking." After being stared at by her daughter for a while, Rue Hui couldn't help but smile and said, "Even if this medicine is really useful, it's impossible." Rue Hui originally wanted to say, "Even if this medicine is really useful, it's impossible to have an immediate effect." Before she finished speaking, the head of Kamiyoshi suddenly trembled and couldn't help but lie back on the bed. Ugh, what's going on? My body feels hot, like there's a fire burning in my stomach." The moment she fell on the bed, Rue Hui only felt that her body was shockingly hot, and that exaggerated heat was so hot that she almost couldn't move her body. This scene naturally frightened Liuli, who was at the side. Thus, eldest young Miss hurriedly shouted, "Mother? Why are you? It's so hot." Just as Colored Glaze reached out to check on Rue Huey's situation, her hand that touched Rue Huey's forehead retracted like lightning. Because it was really too hot. So hot, so hot. This temperature was completely unbearable for humans. At this time, Rue Hui was like a huge furnace, and the temperature emitted from her body was at least 70 to 80 degrees. This temperature was completely abnormal. It should be known that a normal person's temperature was around 36 to 37 degrees. If it was more than 37 degrees, it would be considered a fever. If it was more than 39 degrees, it would be considered a high fever. If it was more than 40 degrees, it would burn people to death. But now, Rue Huey's body temperature was as high as 60 to 70 degrees. She was not an idle star who could practice dancing in a high temperature of 60 to 70 degrees. It would be strange if she didn't die on the spot. Damn it, Ryudo, you bastard. What on earth did you feed mother? Colored Glaze originally thought that the medicine Ryudo brought could quickly improve Rue Huey's situation after taking it. In the end, forget about getting better. She was almost sent to be cremated directly. What is this? A novel postmodern treatment method? As long as the patient is cremated before she dies of illness, she can be free from illness? Quickly enter the next reincarnation? However, just as Colored Glaze was about to go out and ask Rue Hui to come in and help, Rue Hui suddenly took a deep breath, and the originally terrible situation suddenly calmed down a lot. The extreme heat just now came, and went as quickly as it came. Almost in just a few seconds, Rue Huey's body temperature returned to a more normal level. Seeing Rue Hui sit up from the bed all of a sudden, Colored Glaze was a little dumbfounded and asked, Mother, are you okay? I can't say that I'm completely fine, but compared to before, I'm like a different person." Rue Hui, who sat up from the bed, stretched out her hands and glanced at them with an incredulous look in her eyes. After the high temperature burning just now, Rue Hui, who recovered, only felt that her whole body had become a lot more relaxed. The feeling of something wrong with her body had long disappeared. Upon closer inspection, her skin had become even smoother and more supple. Her eyes were bright and full of expression. The pale and sickly look on her face had also flown to who knows where. Her entire body was filled with the vitality that only a young person would have. How is it possible? Am I dreaming? After Rue Hui stood up straight from her bed, she felt incredibly comfortable all over. It was as if that fire had burned away the root of her illness, as well as the curse that had been plaguing the Kanzaki family for hundreds of years. Could it be? Is this a joke? Ryudo, that kid, isn't acting? As one of the few smart people in the current generation, Rue Hui would never believe Ryudo's nonsense of eating a pill can cure an incurable disease. How could there be such a good thing in the world? But the truth was in front of her, and she had to believe it. Because the change in her body was the absolute proof, there was no room for doubt or hesitation. But if what just happened was true, Rue Hui couldn't help but have a huge question. That is such a small pill that can be called a miracle pill. How did Ryudo get it? Colored Glaze, where is Ryudo? Where is he? So Rue Hui immediately asked Colored Glaze, wanting to find Ryudo to ask. He is at the side door fighting with housekeeper Bunnyball. Cough cough, exchanging pointers? Although Ryudo and Bunnyball's fight was obviously not exchanging pointers, Colored Glaze still used such a perfunctory tone to reply in front of Rue Hui. If it was under normal circumstances, this level of lie would be seen through by Rue Hui. But it was different now. Right now, Rue Hui's full attention was on Ryudo. She urgently wanted to know what the kid did for her. Early a few months ago in the hospital, when Rue Hui proposed to cooperate with Ryudo, Ryudo had said this to her with a very dissatisfied tone. You're still alive, aren't you? Why must everything be based on the premise that you will definitely die? Forgive me for not being able to accept a deal based on this premise. Thinking about it carefully, although Rue Hui thought that she had reached a deal with Ryudo, Ryudo actually never agreed to the cooperation plan based on the premise that Rue Hui would definitely die. From start to end, Ryudo never said anything about What will happen after Ruehui dies? Because in this man's heart, Ruehui would definitely not die. If Ryudo only had such thoughts, it wouldn't be strange. But the problem was that Ryudo actually completed this matter. Although it was only a simple matter of less than a minute, Ruehui could imagine how much effort Ryudo had put in for this 1 minute. After all, a pill like this that could cure a terminal illness was definitely not something that could be obtained through ordinary means. Was it some kind of ancient secret recipe? Or was it some kind of near-future black technology? Or was it simply a medicine from outer space? In short, after experiencing the whole process, even if Ryudo said that the medicine came from Mars, Ruehui might believe it, because the effect was too good. But at the same time, because the effect was too good, Ruehui couldn't help but think about the price Ryudo paid to get this medicine. Was it like the Saint Seiya saving the goddess? Or was it like the Western Paradise, where he went through 81 difficulties to obtain the true scripture? No, could it be that he made some kind of deal with the devil and had to offer his soul? Thinking of this, Ruehui couldn't help but get out of bed and change into slippers. She hurriedly pulled colored glaze and walked towards the side door. I must make it up to him. I must make it up to Ryudo. But what should I do? What can I make it up to him? Money? That's too tacky. Status? Ryudo doesn't seem to be interested. Colored glaze? It's his to begin with. For a moment, Ruehui walked towards the side door, while falling into a complicated mystery. What should I use to make it up to Ryudo? To repay that young man for saving my life? Unfortunately, I'm an old woman. If it was 20 or 30 years earlier, I would have given myself to him on the spot. Thinking of this, Ruehui couldn't help but reveal a bitter smile. But what she didn't notice was that after experiencing the baptism of the rogue's 100 immortal pill, when she walked together with colored glaze, they didn't look like a pair of mother and son, but more like a pair of sisters. As for the nonsense about being an old woman, other than Ruehui herself, probably no one would believe it. Chapter 273. However, just as Ruehui and colored glaze hurriedly walked out, the battle outside the side door came to an end. Huff, huff, huff. Well done. This old man can still fight so well despite his age. It was hard to imagine how strong he would be at his peak. At this time, Ryudo stood in the open space outside the side door, gasping for breath. Upon closer inspection, one could see that there were dozens of wounds on his body. Moreover, almost every wound was near a vital point. Although the battle only lasted for less than 5 minutes, Ryudo felt as if he had been fighting with this old hooligan for a year. It was no exaggeration to say that in the past few minutes, Ryudo was jumping left and right on the edge of death, dancing in a minefield. After all, no matter how ridiculously strong his body was, Rabbit Ball had learned his lesson. He specifically targeted the eyes, throat, temples, genitals, and other places that couldn't be cultivated. As long as he hit them, he would die on the spot. Especially the ninja's inner technique, Sacrificial Blade, which was passed down for many years. It was really fast and ruthless. Every swing seemed to be able to make a big hole in Ryudo's body. Of course, even so, Ryudo didn't lose. At most, he could only be said to be at a disadvantage, and he would soon have the upper hand. Because after these few minutes of high-intensity battle, Bunny Ball, who was not far away, was panting even more heavily than Ryudo. From the outside, Bunny Ball's injuries were much less than Ryudo's, but he was panting much more heavily, and the glasses on the bridge of his nose had already fallen to God knows where. The old gentleman's temperament was also gone, and he looked very miserable. Oh no, my speed is about to slow down. What should I do? Bunny Ball panted while looking at Ryudo, who was not far away. After all, he was moving at full speed almost every second. It was equivalent to running a 10,000-meter-long run. Who would be able to endure that? Not to mention, Tumaru was an old man in his 70s. No matter how strong he was, it was inevitable that his body would weaken. His stamina was definitely much weaker than Ryudo. Thus, after fighting with Ryudo for a period of time, Rabbit Ball, who was unable to kill him, had already lost. Next, as long as Rabbit Ball slowed down, he would immediately fall into Ryudo's rhythm. However, this defeat was only limited to the level of a duel. Even if Tuamaru couldn't beat Ryudo, he could still choose to escape. This was something that Ryudo couldn't stop. As a ninja, running away wasn't shameful. But the problem was that Roburu couldn't run now. He couldn't let Ryudo enter the Kamishiro Imperial Garden. This was the old man's last dignity. There was no other way, he could only use this move. Seeing that he couldn't kill Ryudo with his own strength, Rabbit Ball steeled his heart and quietly took out a small capsule ball from his sleeve. In this capsule ball, there was a special poison that the Guardian Ninja used for assassination for generations. As long as this poison was inhaled, it would quickly produce a strong hallucination, and one would dance wildly in the hallucination to death. Seeing Ryudo rushing towards him, Rabbit Ball sighed silently in his heart and suddenly threw the capsule ball in his hand to the ground. Bang! The next moment, a strange light pink smoke rose from the ground and directly sprayed on Ryudo's face. What the hell? Poison mist? Although Rabbit Ball's speed was much slower than before, it was still much faster than Ryudo. Before Ryudo could react, he had already inhaled a mouthful of the pink mist. As for Rabbit Ball himself, he had already retreated 10 meters away and wasn't hit by the pink mist. After rushing out of the mist, Ryudo angrily said, "Cough. Cough cough. What do you mean by this?" "Ryudo Kiryu, you're already dead." Rabbit Ball elegantly tidied his clothes and sneered. "The crime of betraying Ruehue-sama, I'll let you pay with your life." "Ryudo-kun? Ryudo, are you okay?" But before Bunny Ball could finish his sentence, a familiar anxious voice came from the side door not far away. "Nanny!" Bunny Ball quickly turned his head and saw Ruehui, who was wearing a set of pure white pajamas, running out in a hurry. She looked very energetic as she ran straight towards Dragon Battle. And tens of meters behind Ruehue, mist-colored Glaze's panting figure slowly refreshed. Phew, phew, phew. Mother, aren't you running a little too fast? Are you really a sick old woman in her 50s? Colored Glaze couldn't help but curse in her heart when she saw her mother quickly running out and couldn't keep up with her. It was obvious that Ruehue, who had recovered, felt like she was reborn. She felt her whole body was very light and smooth. Even in terms of running, she could even crush Colored Glaze, who was the scum of the human world. She left her in the dust and couldn't even smell the exhaust. Who was the real 50-year-old? And who was the real 16-year-old? Ruehue-sama? Rabbit Ball was dumbfounded when he saw Ruehue rushing over. He thought that Ruehui would be very angry with Long Do for bringing eldest Miss here. But he didn't expect that Ruehui would rush out in such a hurry. Moreover, she seemed to be very concerned about Long Do. At this time, Ryudo was already feeling dizzy because of inhaling the poisonous fog. The scene in his eyes was also distorted like he was looking at a kaleidoscope. What am I? What is this? Am I poisoned? No, I have to buy medicine. Buy. Ryudo tried to stand up straight while he instinctively wanted to open the Krypton shopping mall to find some antidote. But under the condition of being poisoned, his world seemed to have been greatly distorted. He couldn't even open the Krypton shopping mall to buy medicine. In a daze, Ryudo couldn't help but fall forward. He then fell on a soft, warm cushion. The cushion was fragrant and soft, and it emitted a mesmerizing fragrance. It made him feel like a distorted dream suddenly turned into a beautiful spring dream. Of course, Ryudo didn't fall on the cushion, but in the arms of Ruehue, who rushed over. Looking at the dazed, blushing young man in her arms, Ruehue turned to Bunkomaru and said angrily, "Bunkomaru, what did you do to him?" I just didn't want him to go in." "Didn't he disobey your order?" "I didn't ask you this." "What's his situation now? Say it." Ruehue seemed to feel something was wrong, so she couldn't help but yell at Bunkomaru. Being yelled at by Ruehue, Bunkomaru was dumbfounded. Although Bunkomaru was the butler, he was older than Ruehue and also watched her grow up. Therefore, Ruehue treated Bunkomaru as her uncle since young. She had never yelled at him like this before. So Bunkomaru could only stutter. Actually, he is now poisoned by the poisonous fog passed down from generation to generation. Poisonous fog. And then if left alone, He will die within 5 minutes. You. Antidote. Stop talking nonsense, and take out the antidote. No. There's no antidote. Being ordered by Ruehui, Bunkamaru felt sweat dripping down his forehead. This poisonous fog was originally developed to kill people. As long as it was taken out, someone had to die. Naturally, there was no need to develop an antidote. Hearing this, Ruehui gritted her teeth and said angrily, I don't care if you have the antidote or not. Just think of a way now. Otherwise, find a place to commit seppuku. Instantly, Bunkamaru's body trembled and he hurriedly said, Wait, I remember now. I think I can use acupuncture to force the poison out of the body. This way, he can be saved. Then why are you still talking nonsense? Hurry and bring him in for treatment. After angrily glaring at Bunkamaru, Ruehui immediately ordered the old ninja to carry Ryudo into the room for acupuncture. But just as Bunkamaru hurriedly carried Ryudo into the room, Colored Glaze, who was panting towards the door, finally caught up. What's going on? Ryudo, Colored Glaze was shocked when she saw Ryudo being carried on Bunkamaru's shoulder. No, it's nothing. He's just a little uncomfortable. He'll be fine after a few injections. Wait. Because she didn't want Colored Glaze to worry, Ruehui hurriedly ordered Bunkamaru to run towards the room not far away, leaving the panting Colored Glaze behind. Clang! The two casually found a guest room and went in. Ruehui, who was the second to enter, locked the door from the inside while Bunkamaru hurriedly threw Ryudo onto the bed and undid his clothes. He picked up a long needle and inserted it into his body. 1 needle, 2 needles, 3 needles, 5 needles, 6 needles, 7 needles. Seeing Bunkamaru insert a bunch of needles into Ryudo's body, he really looked like the incarnation of Nanny Rome. Ruehui's heart skipped a beat. But what Bunkamaru said before seemed to be right. As he inserted the needles, Ryudo's originally red face gradually returned to normal. But at the same time, his body seemed to be more energetic, just like when he woke up in the morning. Seeing this scene, Ruehui was first stunned and then asked in confusion, Bunkamaru? This is because there are too many acupuncture points. There might be some side effects. Let him release it later. Release? How? Bloodletting? It's not bloodletting, but that. As if knowing that this kind of thing can't be said casually, Bunkamaru quietly whispered that word to Ryuhui-sama. Suddenly, Ruehui's face turned red, and then asked, Can't we do that? No, the last toxin should be concentrated there. I'll go find a ninja now, and it will be cured soon. Having said that, Bunkamaru nodded, and then was ready to quickly walk out. In the world of ninjas' work also includes this kind of treatment. They are all experts in this field, and it's not a problem for them to solve this kind of small matter. But before Bunkamaru took 2 steps, Ruehui hurriedly stopped him, and then said with a red face, Don't go find. I'll treat it. Chapter 274. What? The moment he heard Ruehui-sama's words, Bunkamaru was petrified. Wait, I must have misheard. There must be something wrong with my ears. Ruehui-sama definitely didn't say, Don't go out, I'll do it. How could she say such a thing? Because if he were to heal the dragon now, it would mean that he would need to. No way, right? Seeing the dull expression on Bunkamaru's face, Ruehui-sama sighed slightly. Ryudo-kun's acupuncture points were sealed by you before. That means he should be clean until now, right? Theoretically, that's right. In Bunkamaru and Ruehui-sama's understanding, Ryudo was still in a sealed state, but because of the acupuncture treatment just now, the seal was broken. Then if that's the case, just find a random female ninja to help him. That would be too unfair to Ryudo-kun. Ruehui-sama shook her head slightly. It's not that Ruehui looks down on her ninja, but she knows that those ninja are a group of experienced ninjas. Asking them to help is it's a bit disrespectful to Ryudo, the kind that casually smears his innocence. Generally speaking, in this case, Colored Glaze should be the one to help. But the problem is that Colored Glaze's current identity is very special. Before solving the problem of Yatsuki, Ruehui-sama couldn't let Colored Glaze have anything to do with Ryudo, so as not to lose the last protective talisman. Therefore, in the case that colored glaze can't help, Ruehoi-sama can only do it herself. But Ruehoi-sama, you. Okay, Bunkamaru, you go out first, just find a reason to block colored glaze, don't let her come in. This sigh. Seeing that Ruehoi-sama had made up her mind, Bunkamaru sighed deeply and walked out with heavy steps. What the hell is this? What the hell is this? When he walked out of the room and left the guest room for Ruehui and Ryudo to detoxify, Bunny Ball really wanted to pierce his own head with a needle. He originally wanted to kill Ryudo, who had betrayed Ruehui-sama, who knew that he would make such a big mistake, even causing Ruehui-sama to be sacrificed. According to Bunny Ball's knowledge, Ruehui Darren had never been close to a man since she was young. However, she took the initiative to accept this strange job. To her this was too. Wait a minute. Could it be that it couldn't be? At this moment, Bunny Ball suddenly recalled the incident where Ruehui and Ryudo stayed in the room for an entire afternoon. Although Ruehui and Ryudo were innocent at that time, judging from the situation after young mistress broke in, the two of them should be taking an afternoon nap together. This was enough to make one's imagination run wild. With Ruehoi-sama's identity, how could she take an afternoon nap with a young man who could possibly be her son-in-law in the same room? This was the most ridiculous thing in the world, unless Ruehoi-sama really liked Ryudo. It wasn't the kind of love that a mother-in-law would have for her son-in-law. It was the love of a woman. If that was the case, it wasn't hard to understand why Ruehoi-sama wanted him to detoxify. Sigh. This is troublesome, this is troublesome. How should I deal with this? Thinking of this, Bunny Ball sighed and pushed open the door, giving Azure, who was peeking her head out, a fright. Whoa, Bunny Ball. What's the situation inside? Because the guest room door was locked from the inside, and Colored Glaze was tired from running around, she didn't have the strength to kick the door. She could only obediently wait at the door. Colored Glaze hurriedly grabbed Bunny Ball and asked when he came out, and immediately closed the door. When he saw Colored Glaze, cold sweat appeared on Bunny Ball's forehead. How should he answer? He couldn't tell Miss that Madam was detoxifying someone inside, right? Although Bunny Ball's strength was shocking, and he was a top-notch expert in battle, his brain wasn't particularly good. Especially when facing a wise general like Miss Lioli, it was even more impossible for him to deceive her. Thus he could only awkwardly say, Is it still okay inside? Why is it a rhetorical question? Colored Glaze frowned and asked again. I'm asking you, how is Ryudo's situation now? The young man should be fine now. Then he's fine. You can say that. Then let me go in and take a look. No. Seeing that Luli was about to push open the door and walk in, Rabbit Ball was so scared that his hair stood on end. What is this guy doing? Is there something wrong with him? No, Bunny Ball isn't this kind of person. Could it be that something bad is happening inside, so Bunny Ball can't let me in? After being startled by Bunny Ball's sudden outburst, Colored Glaze paused for a moment before quickly grasping the crux of the problem. If Ryudo was really fine like Bunny Ball said, then this old butler definitely wouldn't block the door and purposely prevent Colored Glaze from entering. But if something really happened to Ryudo, then Bunny Ball wouldn't dare to lie to Colored Glaze. After all, if he really died, he couldn't lie to her forever. This meant that Ryudo should still be alive, but his situation wasn't good, and he couldn't let Colored Glaze near him. Wait, Mother didn't come out? Why would Mother stay inside? Colored Glaze's suspicions grew when she thought of this. She pursed her lips and asked seriously, Mother is inside right now, right? Yes. It's like this. She's taking care of Ryudo. Yes. It's like this. But from your expression, you obviously don't want me to go in. This means that something is happening inside, and it's something that you can't let me know about. Yes. Bah. It's not like this. Seeing Bunny Ball's flustered expression, Colored Glaze knew that she was right. Something was happening inside that she couldn't know about. Although that was the case, but what exactly was going on? Whatever. Let's go in first. Although she didn't know what was going on inside, with Colored Glaze's personality, she naturally wouldn't just stand there without moving. Thus she snorted and said seriously, Move aside, I want to go in. That's not very good. Bunnyball, have you forgotten your identity? I'm telling you to move aside. You won't move aside? That. I can move aside, but not now. You have to wait a little longer. Wait a little longer? How long? Wait. It's hard to say. If it's fast, it'll be 3 minutes. If it's slow, it'll be around half an hour? Bunnyball didn't know whether to laugh or cry. After all, he didn't know how long that brat Ryudo could last. If it was a female ninja, who was proficient in this field, it should be done within a few minutes. But the problem was that the person inside was Ruehue-sama. According to Bunnyball's understanding of Ruehue-sama, he knew that she didn't usually study this field, so the speed and time were naturally harder to grasp. But how could such a perfunctory answer satisfy Colored Glaze? Thus, Colored Glaze took a deep breath and rushed towards the door without hesitation. She tried to push Bunnyball away. Seeing Colored Glaze rushing over, Bunnyball could only smile bitterly and block her while shouting, Miss, you really can't go in. If I let you in now, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Nonsense. If I don't go in now, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Who knows what you did to Ryudo? Ruehue-sama is inside now. Even if you don't believe me, I have to believe your mother. Mother? Hearing this, Colored Glaze's expression became worse. Then she said sternly, I should believe mother. She lied to me for many years. I don't believe her. Don't forget, the first thing Colored Glaze did today was to scold Ruehue-sama for lying to her for so many years. Now Bunnyball said that he wanted to believe her. How could Colored Glaze believe her? What should she do? Sensing Colored Glaze's increasingly agitated emotions, Bunnyball could only awkwardly block the door. He didn't know how to answer anyway. He could only try his best to block her and not let her in. Otherwise, if Miss Leely entered the door now and saw the scene inside, she might faint on the spot and break off her relationship with Madame Ruehue after waking up. If that was the case, then Bunnyball would become the eternal sinner of the Kamiyoshi clan. Then he would have to find a place to commit seppuku. However, a series of farce was happening in front of the guest room. Colored Glaze and Bunnyball were arguing endlessly. One wanted to barge in, while the other would rather die than let her in. Ryudo, who was at the center of all this, was in a strange state. Floating. In his half-awake state, Ryudo felt like his body was floating. His body was floating in the clouds. Some parts of his body could feel the soft touch of the clouds. Most importantly, he could still smell a familiar fragrance in his nose. This fragrance? Who was it again? Even for Ryudo, this fragrance was too recognizable. When he smelled this fragrance, he thought of a person. But because of the strange state he was in, he couldn't think of who that person was. But no matter what, this floating state made him feel very comfortable. It was as if he had rushed to the top of the sky and was about to rush out of the universe. Suddenly, Ryudo felt like he was falling and his eyes slowly opened. Ryudo-kun, you're awake. The moment he opened his eyes, what appeared in front of Long Do was the extremely familiar face of Luli. Chapter 275. Is that Colored Glaze? When he saw her face, Ryudo was slightly relieved, because it meant that he was fine. The moment he regained consciousness, Long Do realized what had happened to him. He had been poisoned by the old man from the cat house bunny pill. Should I say that he's a ninja? Using poison when he can't win? How despicable. But I can also get some similar poison bullets in the future. Those things are really useful. Although Ryudo's consciousness was gradually recovering, his eyes were still a bit blurry, but Colored Glaze's pretty face was still very clear. From Ryudo's point of view, the current Colored Glaze seemed a bit strange. Her face had a bit of nervousness, a bit of panic, and a bit of shyness. That's right, shyness. Ryudo was sure that he didn't see wrong, because at this time, that beautiful face actually had a trace of shyness. This was something he never expected. Is it because I'm too handsome? She's shy even at this time? Thinking of this, Ryudo couldn't help but grin. Then he reached out in a daze to hug Colored Glaze's shoulder and pulled her into his body. Ah! Accompanied by a surprised shout. That soft body was pulled into Ryudo's arms. Don't worry. I'm fine. Even if his head was still a bit dizzy, Ryudo still hugged Colored Glaze in his arms and smiled in her ear. From Colored Glaze's nervous expression, she must have been very worried when Ryudo fainted. It's great to have such a cute girlfriend. Speaking of which, is Colored Glaze my girlfriend now? Strictly speaking, should she be my future wife? From a certain point of view, Colored Glaze didn't really accept Ryudo's confession, so the relationship between the two was still very subtle. But even so, it didn't stop Ryudo from hugging Colored Glaze's stiff body, and gently inhaled the seductive fragrance on her slender and smooth neck. How should I put it? When the two were close together, Ryudo noticed that Colored Glaze's body was a bit wet, as if she had just run and sweated a lot. But the sweat on her body didn't smell bad at all. Instead, it brought out her very personal and elegant body fragrance incisively and vividly, making people want to hug her and smell her again and again, smelling. Just after Ryudo hugged Colored Glaze and sniffed her neck for a while, he suddenly felt something was wrong. Wait, something's wrong? Colored doesn't seem to be that tall? And her scent isn't like this either? According to Ryudo's knowledge, every female's body odor was different. Knowing a woman by smell wasn't just a joke, it was something that could be done. After spending so much time with Colored Glaze, Ryudo was already familiar with the girl's scent. Although the one in Ryudo's arms had a similar scent to Colored Glaze, there was still a clear difference between the two. Compared to Luli's body fragrance, this kind of body fragrance was more rich and lingering. One could feel the intoxicating charm that seeped into one's heart like a jar of golden osmanthus wine after years of accumulation. Ryudo only knew one person like this in his life. No, it can't be. Could it be? Suddenly, Ryudo shook his head slightly to clear his mind. Then, he moved his head away from her swan-like slender neck and turned his head to look at her beautiful face that was capable of causing the downfall of a city. Because Ryudo's mind was clearer now, when he saw the blushing face, he felt like he was struck by lightning, and his mind went blank. Indeed, the face was 70% to 80% similar to Colored Glaze. Or rather, Colored Glaze looked 70% to 80% similar to her. After all, the two of them were mother and daughter. Yes, mother and daughter. At this time, under Ryudo's stunned gaze, Rue-Hui, who was being stared at and held in his arms, teased, "Ryudo-kun, good morning." "Lady Rue-Hui, good morning. Before saying good morning, can you let me go first?" After being reminded by Rue-Hui, Ryudo realized that he was still holding her in his arms like an old pervert, and he was holding the master of Kamiyoshi on the bed. When Ryudo let go of her hands, Rue-Hui also used her hands to support herself on the bed, and slowly got up from Ryudo's body. Her face had a strange expression that was indescribable. This child really scared me to death. For Rue-Hui, the scene just now was really thrilling. She just wanted to see if Ryudo had fully recovered, but she didn't expect that when her face leaned over, he would directly reach out and hug her. When she thought of the feeling of the strong arms hugging her, and the young man's deep breath on her neck, Rue-Hui's face became even redder. But even so, Rue-Hui wasn't an ordinary shy girl. She still smiled and teased Ryudo, who hurriedly sat up. "Sorry, I'm a bit sweaty. It doesn't smell good." No. Ryudo heard her and quickly waved his hand. "It's not like that. Lady Rue-Hui's body smells very... Bah! What am I saying? Doesn't this make me look like a pervert?" When he thought of how he just held Lady Rue-Hui in his arms and smelled her for at least 10 seconds, Ryudo felt a rush of blood to his brain. It was the first time in his life that he felt so embarrassed. At this time, he could only sit on the bed like a primary school student who made a mistake. His hands were behind his back, and his head was slightly lowered, as if he didn't dare to look at anyone. Okay, just now. It was just an accident. Let's not talk about it anymore, okay?" When she saw Ryudo's restrained appearance, Rue-Hui smiled and took the initiative to speak. But what Ryudo didn't notice was that when she said just now, her tone was slightly trembling. After all, the accident that Ryudo was thinking now was not the same as the accident in Rue-Hui's mind. In fact, the accident was over before Ryudo woke up. Okay. After hearing Lady Ruehui's words, Ryudo was slightly relieved. Then he quickly put on his shoes and stood up from the bed. What's going on? This feeling seems to be a bit not right. When he stood up, Ryudo realized that his body seemed to be a bit strange. As for what was strange, it was hard to say. Anyway, it didn't hurt or itch, but there was a feeling of emptiness, and entering emptiness. Right, this situation is similar to when I was at Union's house. Thinking of this, Ryudo showed a puzzled expression and asked Ruehui, who had just turned around. That, Lady Ruehui? Did anything happen when I just fell asleep? The moment she heard this sentence, Ruehui, who was about to open the door for colored glaze, staggered and almost fell down. Lady Ruehui? No, I'm fine. Ahem. Ruehui pretended to cough and calmed her emotions. Without turning her head, she said in a serious tone, Nothing happened just now. 2-1 just gave you a few acupuncture needles, that's all. Oh, alright, I think that should be the case. That feeling was probably just my imagination. Since Lady Ruehui said so, Ryudo didn't think too much, but followed Ruehui out of the room. But when he walked out, Ryudo unexpectedly found a strange situation. That was, Lady Ruehui's legs didn't seem to be very nimble. She seemed to be trembling when she walked. Was it very stable? Why is this? Could it be that Lady Ruehui's illness hasn't fully recovered after taking the Hooligan 100 Immortals pill? That's why she walks so strangely. Thinking of this, Ryudo looked at Ruehui's upper body again. But after seeing the white neck exposed from the collar of the kimono, his face couldn't help but blush. Kimono was a type of clothing that had a strong appeal to a woman's neck. It would make people feel that that part of the neck was especially beautiful. On the other hand, Madame Ruehui was a devastatingly beautiful woman, so her neck was naturally as white and slender as a swan's. When he thought about how he just hugged her and smelled around her neck for a long time, Ryudo had a feeling of shame. Although Lady Ruehui said not to mention this matter again, I'm afraid that for a long time in the future, as long as Ryudo saw her neck, he would remember his hooligan behavior at that time. It was really too embarrassing. But then again, Lady Ruehui's body fragrance is really nice. And it seems like the one floating beside me in my dream is also this smell? Although he knew that he shouldn't think too much, Ryudo couldn't help but think of the dream he had before, where he was floating on the clouds. When he was floating on the clouds, his body was surrounded by this nice body fragrance. Now that he thought about it, it should be because Lady Ruehui had been taking care of him. That's why he kept smelling that fragrance. Creak. While Long Do was letting his imagination run wild, Ruehui, who was walking unnaturally, pushed open the door to the guest room, giving Rabbit Ball and Azurite, who had been confronting each other for a long time, a fright. At this time, Colored Glaze was panting as she sat on the railing of the corridor to recover her strength. It was obvious that she couldn't break through Rabbit Ball's blockade for a long time. Seeing that the door was finally pushed open, Colored Glaze quickly rushed over and shouted, Mother! It's been half an hour. Ryudo, you're fine. Halfway through her words, Colored Glaze saw Ryudo, who followed Ruehui out. Then she happily jumped towards Ryudo. Okay, I'm fine. Don't worry. Ryudo also hugged Colored Glaze in his arms and patted her back gently like he was coaxing a child. When she saw the two hugging, Ruehui's smile seemed to be a bit stiff, but she still didn't say anything and just stood quietly at the side, pretending to be an outsider. But in reality, she was no longer an outsider. Chapter 276. After Ryudo woke up, what happened next was quite simple. Ruehui first scolded Ryudo for being an idiot, who didn't know how to appreciate her feelings. Then, when she heard that Ryudo had spent 1 billion yen to purchase the elixir, she took the initiative to subsidize him with 2 billion yen. Take it for now. Don't be shy. If you don't have enough, come find me. Before leaving, Ruehui smiled and waved at Ryudo. She was obviously in a good mood, especially when she was giving money to the Dragon Battle Flower. Her expression and demeanor were completely like a beautiful rich woman who had a gigolo as her mistress. What's going on? Why does Mother seem a bit off today? When Ryudo was about to leave in his car, Colored Glaze secretly sized up Rue Hui, who had come to the door to send him off from behind. After looking at her from head to toe, she found that there was something off about her. How should she describe this feeling? It wasn't as simple as Rue Hui's illness being cured because of the elixir. Instead, it was as if her mental state and the aura she gave off were different. If the previous Ruehui Kanzaki had been a dignified, elegant, and generous Kanzaki family head, then the current Ruehui Kanzaki seemed like a woman? Actually, this was a bit strange. After all, Ruehui was a woman to begin with. Why did she look like a woman? But in reality, Colored Glaze had never thought that mother was a woman before. Because before this, Ruehui had mainly shown the strong side of a kamiyoshi, showing the imposing demeanor of a pillar of the entire family. Even when she was with her daughter, Colored Glaze, she did her best to control herself and not reveal too much of her maternal instincts. But now, Ruehui was actually unconsciously exuding the strong charm of a mature woman? This wasn't the aura a kamiyoshi should have as the head of the family. Instead, it was the kind of aura a woman would give off when facing the opposite sex that she liked. This was the first time she had seen her mother reveal such a feminine side since she was a Colored Glaze. Even when she followed her mother into the room, Luli watched her walking posture from behind and felt that her waist, buttocks, and legs gave her a completely different feeling when she moved. Colored Glaze? What's wrong? Why are you looking at me? Ruehui seemed to have noticed her daughter's gaze. She was about to return to her room when she turned around and glanced at her in confusion. Then, she casually brushed away a few strands of hair that had fallen to the corner of her eyes. This flirtation was as mature as a peach and exuded a strong sense of femininity. Even a daughter like Colored Glaze could not help but feel her heart palpitate. Oh my God! How did you become like this? For a moment, Colored Glaze didn't know what to say to her mother. It was as if Ruehui had suddenly become a different person. Although it seemed like she was still the head of the family deep down. Yep, deep down, deep down, deep down. Only Ruehui herself knew how deep down she had changed. After Ruehui returned to her room and closed the door from the inside, she directly laid on the bed without any grace and hugged the blanket beside her to cover her face. How could I do such a thing? This is too ridiculous. Ruehui couldn't help but blush when she thought about what she had done in that guest room not long ago. She even felt like dying from embarrassment. But that feeling was quite good. Gulp. Ruehui couldn't help but gulp when she thought about that feeling of floating in the air. Speaking of which, Ruehui wasn't a robot without feelings or needs. She had just been suppressing her own emotions and her feminine side. But as the saying went, a woman at 30 is like a wolf, at 40 is like a tiger, and at 50 is like sitting on the ground and sucking dirt. Due to her family's hereditary disease, although Ruehui was actually over 50, she still had the physical condition of a 30-year-old. In other words, she was now both a wolf and a tiger, and at the same time sucking dirt. It was terrifying. The reason why Ruehui had been able to suppress her feminine side before was mainly because she was smart and had a high EQ, so she could control herself. Plus, she was busy with work, so she was busy with things that she shouldn't be thinking about, so she just let it be. But just because she didn't think about it didn't mean it didn't exist. The water in this dam couldn't be released, and it had been accumulating for several decades. When this dam suddenly burst open, it naturally felt like there were 10,000 horses galloping, 10,000 streams surging, covering the sky and earth. It's over. It's over. Why is my mind filled with that? Ruehui had originally planned to lie down on her bed and rest, but who knew that the moment she got up, her mind would be filled with Ryudo, his young and strong body, as well as her extremely embarrassing actions. The more she thought about it, the more Ruehui felt like she couldn't sleep at all. She kept tossing and turning until she felt dizzy and entered a dream. In her dream, Ruehui seemed to be dreaming of the man who had completely entered her life not long ago. She dreamed of his young, tender, and loving face. Ill-fated relationship. It's really ill-fated. Even in her dream, Ruehui couldn't help but think like this, because this was indeed a strange relationship that she absolutely couldn't let others know. In this tangled time passed day by day. In the blink of an eye, the hot summer had completely passed, and the slightly sad autumn also quickly came to an end. The weather in the middle of October was a state between autumn and winter. It wasn't too cold, but it was more or less a bit cold. It was a relatively comfortable kind. Around 5 o'clock in the afternoon, in the lobby of the Tokyo Emperor Hotel, located in the bustling downtown area of Tokyo, a unique mobilization meeting was being held in full swing. Standing on the temporarily built podium in the lobby was a man who looked gentle and weak, but gave people a strange kind of courage. And under the podium, there was a group of bodyguards wearing a uniform black uniform. They had a strong body and sharp eyes. At first glance, it was obvious that they had experienced hundreds of battles. On the uniforms of this group of bodyguards, there was a golden dragon swirling sky badge. This was the proof of membership of Tokyo's largest security company, the Rulong Security Company. After more than half a year, people in Tokyo were no longer unfamiliar with this security company. It was said that the members of this security company were all smart and capable, and the leader was also smart and farsighted. In just half a year, their name was well known, and they almost took over the security work of half of Tokyo's rich circle. The success rate was 100%, and they absolutely guaranteed that the employer would not suffer any damage during the period of protection. This was the promise given by the Rulong Security Company, and they did indeed achieve this. How could they boast such a big mouth, and also be able to smoothly complete it? There were rumors that the Rulong Security Company was inextricably linked to the current Tokyo, and even Japan's largest extreme organization, the Black Hand Alliance. In the past half a year, the Black Hand Alliance, an extreme overlord formed by the Rulong Group, the Big Dipper Alliance, and the Black Hand Alliance had fully demonstrated their absolute authority in various areas. They gathered and managed intelligence through the nightclubs and other departments under the Black Hand Alliance. Then, the Rulong Group members supported by the Big Dipper Alliance carried out the cleanup and encirclement. In just a few months, the Black Hand Alliance had almost all of the extreme forces in Tokyo, big and small. They killed, chased away, and collected income. After such a reorganization, the entire underworld of Tokyo was now almost ruled by the Black Hand Alliance. Nothing could escape their eyes, and no one could be unreasonable in front of them. With such a behemoth behind them, the business of the Rulong Security Company naturally grew bigger and bigger. When most of the people in the underworld heard that their targets were protected by this company, they would automatically give up assassinations, kidnappings, and extortion, lest they were caught and thrown into the Gulf of Tokyo to feed the fish. At this time, there was a saying in the underworld of Tokyo: if you don't worship the Black Hand Alliance when you enter Tokyo, you will be in big trouble. Although it was half a joke, it was enough to let people clearly understand the identity of the Black Hand Alliance in the Tokyo area. It was no exaggeration to say that they were the real, underground emperor. And today, even the security of the Saitu Guild young lady, Saitu Dunia's 16th birthday ceremony, was completed by this special security company. As everyone knew, the Saitu Guild was a famous fighting organization, but today, the security of such a big venue was handed over to an outsider. This also showed the ability of the Rulong Security Company. Seeing that it was almost time for the opening of the banquet, the general manager of the Rulong Security Company, Takahara Masato, stood in the hall and commanded the bodyguards below. Remember, today is Miss Dunia's coming-of-age ceremony. No mistakes are allowed, understand? Understood. In an instant, a thunderous response came from below, and the response was uniform. It was obvious that this group of bodyguards had undergone very formal training. What should we do when the guests arrive later? Serve them with smiles. Welcome them warmly. What if someone causes trouble later? Take them to the toilet. Beat them half to death. Yes, let's get to work. Following Gao Yuan's order, a large group of professional bodyguards who had been promoted from the Rulong Group quickly scattered around the Tokyo Emperor Hotel and began to guard their posts. Soon after, as magnificent cars drove toward the hotel one after another, the grand coming-of-age ceremony of the Princess of the North slowly began. Chapter 277. While the guests were slowly taking their seats, on the 50th floor of the Tokyo Emperor Hotel, in the room where Ryudo kidnapped Dunya, a girl was in the bathroom, letting the warm water flow over her body. 16 years old. After today, I'll be 16 years old? At this time, as the main character of this coming-of-age ceremony, the little princess of the North, Dunya, was taking a bath in the room while slowly thinking about her future and life. For the previous Dunya, she always felt that these things were very far away from her. Things like becoming an adult, graduating, getting a job, getting married, and so on. It was as if they were in the next life. But after today, after this coming-of-age ceremony, everything seemed to be right in front of her. Especially when his father was still discussing with a certain someone in the living room when they were going to get married. At this time, in the living room, Saito Takahiro was persuading Ryudo, son-in-law, why don't you just propose during this coming-of-age ceremony? Don't waste such a big show. Uncle Takahiro, she's only 16, I'll be 17 soon. There's no need to be in such a hurry. After hearing the words of the curator of the Saito Guild Hall, Ryudo, who was wearing a handsome black suit, didn't know whether to laugh or cry. After half a year, Ryudo, who was almost 17 years old, was obviously a lot more mature than when he first came to the warehouse. Especially after getting involved in the Black Hand Alliance and the Rulong Security Company, his aura as the Extreme Dao Master became more and more intense. In this case, even if Ryudo stood next to Saito Takahiro, his aura didn't lose at all. It was impossible to tell that they were father-in-law and son-in-law. Of course, this father-in-law and son-in-law relationship was something that Takahiro blindly believed. For the time being, Ryudo didn't plan to marry Dunya so soon. The two of them were still too young. Although Japan had a rule that one could get married at the age of 16, there weren't many people who would actually do so. Most of them had no choice but to do so after getting pregnant. However, Wu Hong's words gave him a different feeling. He raised his eyebrows and glared at him. Hey, don't tell me you're not going to deny it after eating it. Eat up. Ryudo's eyes widened when he heard that. Don't insult my innocence for no reason. What did I eat and wipe away? You're still denying it? Dunya often went to look for you and even stayed at your house. I don't believe that you haven't done anything to her. At this point, Wu Hong crossed his arms in front of his chest with an attitude that said, if you don't admit it, I'll beat you to death. It was as if he didn't feel that his words were embarrassing at all. Why would I do anything to Dunya? I really didn't. Suddenly, Ryudo didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he quickly shook his head. Indeed, in the past few months, Dunya did come to look for him frequently, and even stayed overnight at the Rulong Group headquarters. However, how could Ryudo do that to Dunya? After all, compared to Yunyen and Colored Glaze, who were even more intimate, Ryudo and Dunya were just bad friends until now. The two of them were on good terms, but they didn't have any romantic feelings. On one hand, it was because Dunya was still young, and she hadn't opened her eyes to love. On the other hand, Ryudo felt that she was too young to do anything to her. Therefore, in this period of time, Ryudo, Yunyen and Colored Glaze often kissed and hugged, but he always treated Dunya as a friend. Not to mention doing anything to her. He didn't even kiss her. Who knew that after Ryudo said this, Wu Hong became even angrier. He said angrily, oh, then you're looking down on my daughter. Why would I? I still like Dunya, it's just what? It's just that I still can't see her as a woman. You know, whether it's her body or her personality. Although he didn't want to say this in front of Wu Hong, Ryudo had no choice but to say it. Did he like Dunya? Yes, he did. But liking her didn't mean that they had chemistry. Until now, Dunya didn't give Ryudo a moment of chemistry like Yunyen and Colored Glaze. Even if they shared a cup and kissed indirectly, neither of them would blush or have their hearts beat faster. It wasn't because Dunya was pretty or not. It was because the two of them got along too naturally and didn't have chemistry. It was just like how childhood sweethearts who were too familiar with each other wouldn't fall in love with each other. Well, it's not that I don't understand. Hearing this, Wu Hong couldn't help but sigh and smile bitterly. Compared to the child's mother Ovila, she really doesn't have any feminine charm. Although Dunya looked cute, she didn't have any feminine charm. This was a fact that Wu Hong couldn't deny, especially when compared to her mother. In fact, from Dunya's doll-like beautiful appearance and Wu Hong's rough appearance, it wasn't hard to see that Dunya's mother had beautiful genes. The woman that made Wu Hong abandon his position as the successor of the Saito Club and stay in the snowy northern kingdom, and even fall out with his family to marry her, was a world-famous ballet dancer. At the same time, she was also the chief dancer of the Moscow Lavsky Theater Ballet Company. Back then, Ovila wasn't just beautiful. Her outstanding temperament and elegant figure made people fall head over heels for her. She was even known as the Northern Kingdom Princess, and was treated as a national treasure by the entire country. Wu Hong was attracted by the beauty and temperament of the Northern Kingdom princess. Coincidentally, when Ovila was being forced by a nobleman, he stood up and chased away all the lackeys sent by the nobleman. That was how he won the heart of the beauty. It's a pity that Ovila died young. Dunya followed me, a rough man. Naturally, she was influenced by my rough habits. It's all my fault. When mentioning his late wife, Wu Hong's tone couldn't help but become gloomy. If Ovila didn't die so early, Dunya wouldn't have followed her mother for a longer time. She wouldn't have become such a tomboy. She would have been an elegant little princess. Don't say that. No one wants that. Suddenly, Ryudo walked over and patted Wu Hong's shoulder. Obviously, he understood the feelings of his future father-in-law. However, just when the two men were chatting in the hall, a slender figure was standing at the corner of the hall with her back against the wall. Speaking of which, Dunya had just finished showering and changed into a beautiful princess dress. She was preparing to quietly go out to receive the praise of her father and Ryudo, but she didn't expect that when she came to the corner, she would hear such an unexpected conversation. So that's how it is. I don't have the charm of a woman? Originally, Dunya had just passed her 16th birthday. She had suddenly turned from a young girl into an adult. She was somewhat anxious about the future, but at this time, she heard the conversation between Ryudo and Wu Hong. Her mood became even worse. So, Dunya didn't dare to let the two know that she was here. She quietly returned to her room and stood in front of the large full-body mirror to look at herself. Her reflection in the mirror was a young girl with unparalleled beauty. At this time, Dunya was wearing a gorgeous princess dress decorated with ribbons and lace, coupled with her long silver hair that flowed down like a waterfall, her skin that was as white as porcelain, and her facial features that looked like they were drawn with a ruler. She was as beautiful as a dream. If all other factors were excluded, Dunya's beauty was actually top-notch. Compared to Yunyan and colored glaze, she was even better. But if a man had to choose a wife, his first choice wouldn't be Dunya. At least, Ryudo's first choice wouldn't be her. And the reason for this, Dunya was actually well aware of it. Charm of a woman. I've never thought about this before. Dunya, who was standing in front of the full-length mirror, sighed slightly. She slowly took out a pendant from her white neck. As the pendant opened, the small photo inside was exposed to the young girl's eyes. In the photo were two women, one big and one small. The small one looked innocent and very cute. The big one was elegant and moving. Her whole body emitted a strong aura of beauty. This photo was a photo of Dunya and her mother Ovila. It was also the last photo of Ovila, before she passed away from illness 10 years ago. Her mother in the photo was just like how Dunya remembered her. Not only was she beautiful and moving, but she also had a special charm. Her every frown, every smile, every action seemed to attract the attention of others. The spotlight on the stage uncontrollably fell on this princess of the Northern Kingdom. Ovila was a woman with this ability. However, although Dunya inherited Ovila's beauty, she obviously didn't inherit her temperament. Or rather, she didn't have the time to inherit her temperament. After looking at the photo, Dunya couldn't help but slowly lower her head to look at her feet that were wearing round leather shoes. She recalled the scene when her mother taught her ballet when she was young. Dance is a kind of magic that brings out a girl's charm to the extreme. Dunya is so beautiful. If she learned how to dance, who knows how many boys would fall for her when she grows up. Hee hee. Back then, her mother said as she reached out to stroke Dunia's little head. Then, she gave her a pair of ballet shoes that were specially made for her younger daughter. Even if Dunia was a few times heavier than a normal person, as long as she had this pair of shoes, she would be able to dance lightly and gracefully. That was obviously what Ovila had in mind back then. It was a pity that all of these dreams had vanished with Ovila's departure. Since her mother passed away 10 years ago, Dunia never practiced ballet again. She never wore the pair of dancing shoes that she treasured when she was young. Until today, that pair of shoes was still in the cabinet. However, her feet had become too big and couldn't fit in anymore. Chapter 278. The Pearl of the Northern Kingdom, the daughter of Moscow's top dancer, Ovila, didn't know how to dance. She was also a rough, clumsy little bear who only cared about fighting and drinking vodka. Thinking of this, Dunia couldn't help but smile bitterly. She then looked at the girl in the mirror, who was only beautiful, but was actually a tomboy. For the first time, she couldn't help but feel disgusted with herself. Mother is obviously an elegant and noble woman. Am I disgracing her like this? Originally, Dunia was already at the age of 16 and had just entered adulthood. After suddenly understanding the gap between her and her mother, the feeling was like adding salt to the wound. It was obviously a once-in-a-lifetime coming-of-age ceremony. She was wearing the best clothes, she was dressed like a little princess. Her entire family and many friends came from afar to celebrate with her. But now Dunia couldn't feel happy at all. She even felt like a clown, and wanted to leave here as soon as possible, and find a place where no one was. Knock, 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 knock. At this time, there was a slight knocking sound from the door, followed by Ryuto's signature voice. Hey Dunia, have you changed your clothes? Yes. Then can I come in? Yes. After getting Dunia's permission, Ryuto pushed the door open and walked in with a smile. Oh, today's little princess is so beautiful. Seeing Dunia's exquisite clothes, Ryuto couldn't help but give her a thumbs up. Indeed, Dunia was a stunning beauty to begin with, and after washing up and dressing up, she looked like a fairy from an oil painting that had descended to the mortal world. It made people want to give her a whirlwind and throw her around. But in the face of Ryuto's praise, Dunia just glanced at him and walked out. At the same time she said, Let's go, the banquet is about to start. Oh, what happened? Following Dunia outside, Ryuto couldn't help but feel a little puzzled. Although his nerves were a bit thick, he could clearly feel the strange aura from Dunia. What happened to her? It's my birthday and coming-of-age ceremony. Why is she so unhappy? Is it because there's no vodka to drink? Or is it because there's no cream pancake to eat? Poor thing. After going back, I'll ask someone to prepare more vodka and cream pancakes for her to eat. Longdo didn't think too much about Dunia's strange mood at this time. He simply summed it up with a reason that a young girl might be unhappy with. And in this coming-of-age ceremony, Dunia's performance was very normal. All the members of the Saitu Guild Hall, who came from afar, sat in rows in the banquet hall, under the warm hospitality of Wu Hong and the other members of the Saitu Guild Hall. This banquet could be said to be very enjoyable for both the guests and the host. Especially when Dunia, dressed in a gorgeous dress, walked to the podium to speak as the protagonist of today's banquet. Her maturity and sense of steadiness surprised everyone. Oh, Dunia is so steady today, it looks like she really grew up. When Dunia finished her speech and walked down the podium, Ryuto clapped his hands and smiled at Colored Glaze and Yunyen, who were sitting next to him. Because today was a banquet occasion, the two beauties wore a very standard dress, but Colored Glaze's was a Japanese dress, and Yunyen's was a Western dress. These two beauties sitting next to Ryuto gave people the feeling of one foot on two ships, two big aircraft carriers. It was really a pity, like two flowers inserted in a giant cow dung. But at this moment, Colored Glaze slightly raised her eyebrows and sneered. Do you think Dunia suddenly grew up, so that's why she looks like that? Huh. Otherwise. At this time, Colored Glaze had already hinted at something, but Ryuto obviously didn't notice it. Idiot, She obviously has something in her heart, and she's depressed, so that's why she's like this. You really don't understand a woman's heart. Seeing Ryuto's dull look, Colored Glaze really wanted to punch him. Although Dunya had been pretending as if nothing had happened, Colored Glaze's sharp eyes and meticulous thoughts naturally saw through that guy's underwear at a glance. Without a doubt, Dunya was feeling depressed because she didn't know what was going on. The most exaggerated thing was that Ryuto actually didn't see it at all, which made Colored Glaze feel pity for his nerves that were thicker than steel. How did this young lady fall for this fellow at that time? Could it be that I fell for his fearless personality? Thinking of this, Colored Glaze couldn't help but sigh deeply, as if she was silently mourning for her hopelessly low standards in choosing a partner. Dunya has something in her heart. Feeling down? Huh. Now that you mention it, that seems to be the case. At this time, after hearing Colored Glaze's words, Ryuto finally realized that there was something wrong with that guy just now. Usually, Dunya was an optimist who showed everything on her face. Other than fighting, drinking, and eating, she basically didn't have any special hobbies. Because of this, Dunya usually didn't reveal the sentimental emotions of a young girl. Over time, it was very easy for people to overlook that she was actually just a 16-year-old little girl. After her coming-of-age ceremony ended, Dunya, who walked down from the podium, didn't follow her father to the dining table. Instead, she found an excuse to go to a secluded corridor not far away. To be honest, it wasn't that Dunya wasn't hungry, but she felt that she didn't have the appetite to eat, as if there was a stone blocking her heart. But it had to be said that this method of escaping made her feel very ashamed, because Dunya had already decided not to escape, but she still didn't want to go to the crowded banquet hall. Phew, what am I doing? Unknowingly, Dunya couldn't help but sigh. I also want to know what you're doing, tell me. It's useless even if I tell you, people like me. Yeah. Originally, Dunya wanted to casually say, people like me are probably hopeless. But halfway through, she realized that the wall beside her definitely couldn't talk. So Dunya quickly turned her head and saw that Ryuto's figure in a black suit was already here, looking at her with a curious gaze. This when she realized that the sentence just now was actually Ryuto's question. Dunya almost instinctively broke into a run, throwing her determination to not escape into the smelly ditch. Whoosh! But before Dunya could run a step, a warm, wide hand grabbed her right wrist, and then the seemingly light, but actually heavy body was pulled back. Hey! Immediately running when you see me. Are you acting out a Cinderella? Speaking of which, your crystal shoes didn't fall off? After pulling back Dunya, who wanted to run in a hurry, Ryuto looked at her feet wrapped in white stockings and leather shoes, as if he was questioning why the shoes were still firmly on her feet. When she was pulled back by Ryuto, Dunya first snorted, then lowered her head and said in a small voice, "Humph, what does it have to do with you?" Although she was pulled back by Ryuto, Dunya was actually still in a depressed state, so she wasn't in the mood to mess around with this idiot. What's wrong? Is there something you're unhappy about? Who pissed you off? Should I beat him up to help you vent your anger? Seeing that the little girl was unwilling to talk to him, Ryuto put his arm around her shoulder as usual, and pretended to be a boss as he spoke into her ear. Who knew that after Ryuto put his arm around her shoulder, Dunya's face turned red, and she quickly shook her shoulder to shake off his stinky hand, and then quickly stepped back a few steps. What's wrong? Why is this guy like a little hedgehog today? I can't even get close? Ryuto, who was shaken off by Dunya's hand, was somewhat puzzled at this time. After all, if it was normal, Dunya would tell him immediately if she was unhappy about something. Weren't the two of them good buddies who could talk about anything? Why did it suddenly become like this? He couldn't even hug her shoulder? Just as Ryuto was puzzled, the small phone in his pocket vibrated a few times, indicating that there was an incoming call. Sorry, I have to take the call first. After saying goodbye to Dunya, Ryuto turned around and took out the anti-eavesdropping phone that Sensible specially made for him. He pressed the answer button. From the caller ID, it was one of the 3 leaders of the Black Hand Alliance, Kai Yang. He was also the leader of the Big Dipper Alliance Armed Front. Because Kai Yang and Ryudo were from the same hometown, the two would occasionally go to Tessa's shop to drink, so their relationship was quite close. Hello, Kai Yang. What's up? Ryudo, because the Tomahawk in Moscow has a new leader, they want to sign a new weapons supply contract with us, and the price will be tripled. After the call was connected, Kai Yang's calm voice came from the other side, but the words didn't sound so good. As the leader of the Big Dipper Alliance, Kai Yang's main business was to smuggle firearms from all over the world, and the main supplier was the Northern Mafia, which was the bear named Tomahawk. Tomahawk, tripling the price? Hearing this, Ryudo couldn't help but snort. Are their brains fried? Triple? They're not the only supplier in the Northern Mafia. We won't buy from anyone else at this price. The problem is that the large mafia, including the Emotion and the Arctic villains, have already refused to negotiate with us, and they have threatened not to let other small dealers contact us. So that's why they want to extort us. Suddenly, Ryudo understood what the Emotion Mafia were thinking. They saw that the Black Hand Alliance was rising too quickly in Japan, so they wanted to extort more from Ryudo and the others. Kai Yang, I want to go to Moscow to see the new leader of the Tomahawk. Arrange it for me immediately. You? Personally? That's not good. It might be dangerous. Those guys aren't normal. It's okay. They're not normal, and I'm not normal either. Saying this, Ryudo couldn't help but reveal a bloodthirsty smile, and at the same time, he couldn't help but loosen his muscles. After all, he hadn't personally dealt with someone in a long time, and recently, he was itching for a fight. Coincidentally, this dumb bear came to his door, so how could he not exercise? Chapter 279. Speaking of the Mafia, most people may not have a deep impression of them, because they are not as famous as the Italian Mafia, the Japanese Yakuza, the Mexican drug lords, and other big organizations. However, only those who were in the know would know that Mao Xiong's Mafia had a long history, It was the only mafia in the world that had a complete industrial chain and the largest range of influence. The earliest mafia came from the Gulag, a labor camp under the Soviet system. It was the largest labor camp in the world, and even in the history of mankind. It was said that more than 20 million people had been imprisoned in it for decades. With such a large number of prisoners, it unintentionally formed a special small society. The only thing this society believed in was the dark code of absolute power. In the end, an unprecedented profession was even born in the Gulag: disciplinary bandit. Before joining the profession, they had to swear an oath of complete obedience to the precepts of crime and refuse to work legally. All necessities had to be obtained through crime. Otherwise, they would not hesitate to starve or freeze. From a certain perspective, a law thief was a pure bad guy with a goal. It was impossible to work. Even if they starved to death, they would not work. If there was no food, they would rob. If there was no money, they would steal. Whoever dared to work to earn money for their family was a traitor. They would drown in the toilet. After the outbreak of World War II, many law thieves in the Gulag were sent to the battlefield and became members of the punishment camp. Basically, they were the ultimate cannon fodder, who charged at the front of the battle and were responsible for taking bullets. Although the law thieves suffered heavy casualties during World War II, some of them survived and returned to the Gulag prison. Those who survived from the cannon fodder camp were basically people that even the king of hell wouldn't dare to accept. They were fierce men who had truly experienced blood and fire. Every day, they would put their heads on their waists and charge towards long guns and cannons. In the end, as the Gulag was completely abolished, these fierce men who had fought in wars, carried guns, and worked in labor camps were directly thrown into normal society, thus giving birth to all kinds of mafias. From this point of view, the Japanese Kyoto that Ryudo and the others belonged to was simply a kindergarten-level organization compared to the Mao Bear Mafia. Whether it was combat power, organizational ability, or history, they were not on the same level. In the legends of the Mao Bear Mafia, the most exciting and unbelievable thing was that this group of guys had once sold nuclear materials. It was said that someone once went to the Malbert Mafia and said that he wanted to buy a nuclear submarine. In the end, the mafia manager did not say that he had it, nor did he say that he did not have it. Instead, he directly asked, "Do you want it with missiles or without missiles?" Of course, this might just be a joke, but it also reflected how much wealth the mafia had received after the collapse of the Soviet Union. It even included some top scientists who specialized in nuclear weapons. It was simply a fantasy. Therefore, Mao Xiong's mafia was very strong, very strong. It was not the ordinary kind of strong. It belonged to the type whose strength far exceeded their fame. Kai Yang, who had been working with Tomahawk and other mafias for many years, was naturally very clear about this situation. Therefore, he obviously didn't approve of Ryudo's move to go to Moscow to negotiate with those guys. Kai Yang certainly knew how good his boss was at fighting, but from a certain perspective, it wasn't a matter of whether he could fight or not. The mafia absorbed a lot of nutrients from the collapse of the Soviet Union, which was a huge opportunity that no other mafia in the world had. There were a lot of guns, ammunition, and even all kinds of heavy weapons. Even if Ryudo could fight, as long as he was surrounded by dozens, hundreds, or thousands of submachine guns, he would still die on the spot. You should think carefully. That's their territory. No matter how many people we send, they have more people. We don't need to send a lot of people. We're just going to negotiate with the new leader of Tomahawk, not to start a war. But the new leader, don't worry. If we really fight, he can only jump here. Anyway, go and arrange for Mao Xiong's people to prepare to welcome him. I'll fly over tomorrow. Seeing that he couldn't persuade Ryudo, Kai Yang could only sigh. After hanging up the phone, he hurriedly contacted the most elite members of the Black Hand Alliance in Mao Xiong. Regardless of whether or not the negotiations with Ryudo would succeed, at the very least, they had to ensure his personal safety. This was what Kai Yang cared about the most. What new head of Tomahawk? I don't know what he's talking about. After hanging up the phone, Long Do subconsciously complained. However, before he turned his head, a complicated voice came from the side. Are you going to Moscow tomorrow? Ryudo looked to the side and saw that Dunya had unknowingly snuck up to his side. Presumably, the little princess had heard some of the conversation just now. Yes, I have some business problems to deal with. I want to go too. Ah, you also want to. By the way, Moscow is your hometown, right? You were born there? If Ryudo remembered correctly, Dunya was born in Moscow, the capital of Mao Xiong, and lived there until she was 6 years old. It was also after Dunya's mother passed away that Wu Hong, who didn't have any relatives in Moscow, brought Dunya back to Japan. It could be said that Moscow for Dunya was a hometown that existed only in her memories. Even if she went back once a year to pay respects to her mother, the father and daughter were in a hurry and didn't have a good time there for a long time. If it was under normal circumstances, Ryudo naturally wouldn't refuse Dunya's request. But this time, Ryudo didn't go to Moscow for a vacation, but to negotiate with the mafia. The so-called negotiation, especially the negotiation with Mao Xiong, really anything could happen. If there was a disagreement, there might be a killing on the spot. With Ryudo's current inhuman strength, he certainly didn't have to be afraid of the mafia like Tomahawk. But if he brought Dunya with him, it seemed that he was looking down on her. It doesn't matter. After telling Dunya the ins and outs, she said faintly, "It's just the mafia. It's not like I haven't been chased by the mafia with my father when I was a child." Mafia? Well, Wu Hong did do this kind of thing. Hearing this, Ryudo remembered that Wu Hong and Kazuma fought with the mafia in Siberia before. Although Ryudo didn't see it with his own eyes, it was said that the two had killed the mafia there before. Dunya might have been involved when she was a child. Of course, the most important thing was that Dunya was not an ordinary little girl now. In the past few months, Dunya had mastered the martial arts of Saitu Club to a very high level. She even defeated many teachers. Her strength was quite amazing. Now she did have the confidence to not put the ordinary mafia in her eyes. However, the trip to Moscow this time was indeed very difficult. If it wasn't for the fact that he had no other choice, Long Do really didn't want to bring Dunya along. but she stubbornly insisted on going with them, so there was no other way. If you don't take me, then I will go by myself. It's none of your business if something happens. Since Dunya had already put it this way, Longdo had no choice but to take her along. After all, it was more dangerous for her to go to Moscow alone. With the power of Tomahawk, they would definitely find out her relationship with Ryudo and capture her as a hostage. So, early the next morning, Ryudo booked a ticket to Moscow with Dunya. They set off from Tokyo International Airport and flew to Moscow Sheremetyevo Airport. From Tokyo to Moscow, the flight time was almost 9 hours. Throughout the flight, Dunya had an indifferent look on her face. She didn't seem to be happy at all. Dunya, do you want to eat potato chips? No. Dunya, do you want to play games? I brought 2 game consoles. I don't want to play. Dunya, I ordered cream cookies for you in the cabin at noon. Are you happy? Thank you. Just like this. No matter how Ryudo tried to get close to her, Dunya, who was sitting next to the window, just looked at the scenery outside the window and didn't say a word. Needless to say, this Dunya was actually quite pleasing to the eye. Previously, Ryudo's comment on Dunya was, "What a beautiful little loli. It's a pity that she has a mouth." After all, at that time, Dunya was degrading and cursing as soon as she opened her mouth. At this time, Dunya became much quieter. The expression on her face was very cold, and she didn't even speak. With the northern-style light blue broggy dress on her body, she looked like a beautiful doll. But even so, Ryudo was still a little worried when he saw her like this. Yesterday, at the coming-of-age ceremony of Miss Saito, her "I don't love anyone" look was very surprising. Who would have thought that after getting on the plane a day later, Tonia's attitude was still the same, and there was no change at all? What's wrong with her? Why does she feel like she was wronged? But Dunya didn't look like the kind of person who would cry after being wronged. For Ryudo, who was relatively insensitive, he couldn't understand Dunya's delicate thoughts at this time. After trying all kinds of methods, he could only let her calm down for a while. 9 hours later, the flight successfully arrived at the Sheremetyevo Airport of the northern capital Moscow. Although it was October at the end of autumn, the weather in Moscow was very cold compared to Tokyo. Even if there was no snow today, the temperature was still in the single digits. Moscow, I'm back. After getting off the plane, Dunya looked at the city where she was born, and a complicated expression flashed in her eyes. Chapter 280. When Ryudo and Dunya got off the plane and walked out of the exit, he saw an Asian man holding a sign with the strange surname Tongnyo in the crowded pickup line. According to Kai Yang, he would do his best to arrange all the forces of the Big Dipper Alliance in Moscow to ensure Ryudo's safety. Naturally, there would be local members responsible for the pickup. Because there were spies everywhere in Moscow, they couldn't use the conspicuous surname Tong Sheng. After all, the boss of the Black Hand Alliance, Ryudo Kiryu, was already quite famous worldwide. "Hello, Boss Tong Sheng." Seeing Ryudo and Dunya walking over, the Asian man quickly put away the sign and quickly bowed to them. He also made a special communication gesture of the Black Hand Alliance. Currently, under the management of Long Do, Lu Li, and the others, the alliance already had a complete set of systems. From the communication between superiors and subordinates to all kinds of secret codes, they had everything. Even the foreign intelligence network had been completely set up. When he followed the elite member from the Big Dipper Alliance out, Ryudo asked casually, "Now the boss of Tomahawk already knows I'm coming, right?" "Yes. Boss Kai Yang has already sent a meeting request to Mr. Yakov, and they also responded that Boss Tong Sheng is welcome at any time." "Oh, you mainly deal with Tomahawk here, right? You should be familiar with their new boss, Yakov. What kind of person do you think he is?" When asked this question, the Han man named Ishian frowned slightly and said cautiously, "Mr. Yakov is the most despicable villain. I don't think I can trust anything he says." According to what Ishian knew, the new boss of Tomahawk, Yakov, was the son-in-law of the old boss Bolev. Since he married Bolev's daughter, he had made a meteoric rise in the gang. Even after Bolev's accidental death, not long ago, he naturally became the new head of the gang. The old boss of Tomahawk, Bolev, had been an old friend of Kaiyang for more than 10 years. If Bolev was still alive, there was no way he would have made such an extortionate request to the Black Hand Alliance. Yi Xian had seen Yakov many times over the years in Moscow. How should he put it? Every time, he felt that this man was filled with deep malice. Recently, the underground world of Moscow has been spreading like wildfire, saying that Bolev's death is related to Yakov. I believe this rumor 100%. After bringing Ryudo and Dunya to the airport, Yi Xian directed several men in suits to drive over and welcome his brother and sister-in-law into the car. It took about an hour to drive from Sheremetyevo Airport to Moscow City, which gave Ryudo and Yi Xian some time to communicate. In other words, the problem this time is probably the new boss of Tomahawk, Yakov, right? After getting in the car, Ryudo looked at Dunya, who was leaning against the window, seemingly deep in thought, and asked Yi Xian, who was sitting in the passenger seat. It's hard to say, but Yi Xian shook his head. He signaled the driver to drive and calmly reported. If it was only Yakov alone, he would at most control Tomahawk to not trade with us. But this time, there are 7 or 8 other mafia groups that refuse to trade with us. This is not something Yakov can do. According to what Kaiyang had said, 7 or 8 mafias in Moscow, including Bear Mo, an Arctic scoundrel, had rejected the arms deal with the Black Hand Alliance. This matter was truly unusual. If it was only Yakov who had a problem, then he could only represent Tomahawk at most. It was impossible for him to have the power to involve so many other mafias. After all, those mafias in Tomahawk were competitors and even enemies. So I suspect that there is a bigger force involved. Or it's not a suspicion, but there is definitely a bigger force involved. But I haven't figured out who it is. Oh, why do you say that? Because according to our intelligence network, Tomahawk and other mafia groups seem to be doing a huge deal to sell some very special materials. Very special materials? Hearing this, Ryudo asked jokingly, "What materials are so special, Big Ivan?" Exactly. What? Originally, Long Do only wanted to tease Yi Xian, but who would have thought that Yi Xian would nod his head? This immediately shocked Long Do. The so-called Big Ivan was the largest hydrogen bomb made by the Soviet Union. It was also the most powerful bomb in size, weight, and power among all the types of bombs detonated by humans. Yi Xian said that someone wanted to buy the materials to make Big Ivan, which meant that those people wanted to buy the materials to make thermonuclear weapons. It was extremely difficult to buy nuclear materials in today's world. After all, this thing was not something that could be bought with money. Just finding a buyer was close to a fantasy, but just because it was extremely difficult didn't mean it was impossible. According to Yi Xian, when the Soviet Union collapsed a few decades ago, a batch of nuclear materials was distributed to KGB agents and some armed organizations. Some nuclear physics scientists even cooperated with the mafia after the collapse of the Soviet Union to deal with these things. Although after so many years, there weren't many mafia groups that still had nuclear materials on hand. But coincidentally, Tomahawk, Mozambique, Arctic Villains, and other mafia groups each had a small batch of enriched uranium and other radioactive materials. Together, it was enough to make a big guy. Based on the timing of the mysterious force's appearance, their deal should be directly related to the change in attitude of Tomahawk and other mafia groups. It seems that they are targeting our Black Hand Alliance. But I don't know what. There's no need to think about it. I probably know who is behind it. Just as Yi Xian was trying to analyze who was behind the scenes, Ryudo sneered slightly, just like Conan, who had just discovered the truth of the matter. If it was in the original world, Ryudo wouldn't be able to guess who was behind it, but in the world of Red Album 2, no one survives. A group of people happened to be trying to make the ultimate weapon that could destroy the world. And that group of people was Heavenly Eye Group. That's right, it was the Heavenly Eye Group. Who else could it be? The Heavenly Eye Group was originally an international-level arms dealer. Their technology tree in weapon manufacturing had already reached a quite exaggerated level. As long as there were suitable materials, it wasn't difficult to make nuclear weapons. This was especially true for the entry-level nuclear weapon, the atomic bomb. That was something that could be created decades ago. Therefore, for most forces, the most troublesome part of creating a nuclear weapon was to obtain the materials and resist the pressure, not the creation itself. Because of the existence of the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, any force that wanted to make nuclear weapons would be sanctioned by international gangsters. In addition, the materials were hard to find, so there were very few forces that had nuclear weapons. It didn't mean that nuclear weapons were difficult to make. But would a woman like I am care about this? What a joke. At the end of the original storyline, Youngji used all the resources of the corporation to create a large hydrogen bomb called the Sixth Demon's Wrath. As long as it was detonated, it would cause the entire island to explode, causing the Earth's crust to change, earthquakes and tsunamis to follow one after another. In the end, the entire country would be finished. At that time, many players were wondering where IM got so many nuclear materials. Now it seemed that Ryudo had accidentally found the answer. So that's how it is. It seems that the nuclear materials of the Heavenly Eye group were obtained from the Hairy Bear Mafia? Then the person who came to communicate and purchase should be him? He seems to be a hairy bear too? Thinking of this, Ryudo couldn't help but think of a weirdo with a muscular body who wore a windbreaker no matter how hot the weather was. The head of the Heavenly Eye Group's weapons department, Nikolai. In the original work, Nikolai was a hairy bear. It was said that he used to be a KGB agent serving the Soviet Union. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, he accidentally met IM and was taken in by her, becoming the core force of this group. Such an old agent who was born in Moscow and had a wide range of contacts in many fields, plus the exaggerated background and wealth of the Heavenly Eye Group, it wouldn't be difficult for him to reach an agreement with the Mafia like Tomahawk. In that case, the main opponent this time wasn't just Tomahawk, but also the weapons department behind them. Ryudo had a deep impression of the weapons department that was mainly responsible for the development and use of weapons in the original work. How to describe it? If the pharmacy department was a group of monster doctors led by Yomi who developed superhuman potions like Hell Butterfly, then the weapons department was a group of monster designers led by Nikolai who developed all kinds of strange and highly destructive weapons. For example, the bullet absorption device that Ryudo was tricked by IM in the unrestrained Sky Tower was the work of the weapons department. It was easy to imagine how powerful the technology of these guys was. It was completely beyond the level of half an era. If he wanted to fight with them in Moscow, Ryudo, Ixien, and a few other members wouldn't be enough. So after Ryudo reacted, he quickly dialed Gao Yuan's number. "Hello, boss. What's the matter?" Gao Yuan immediately mobilized the Dragon Fang to Moscow. They must arrive by tomorrow. No matter what mission they are on, temporarily stop. There's something important to deal with. Understood. I'll do it right away. Although Ryudo didn't make it very clear, Gao Yuan immediately nodded and agreed. After all, in Gao Yuan's understanding, if the boss did this, he must have his reasons. He should do what he should do and not ask what he shouldn't ask. Chapter 281. Ryudo ordered Gao Yuan to arrange the most elite special force of the Black Hand Alliance, Dragon Teeth, to help. He then turned around and chatted with Ixien for a while. The cars that came to welcome Ryudo finally drove into a busy street and into the city of Moscow, the capital of the Northern Kingdom. Oh, so this is the street of Moscow? It looks quite unique. Looking at the streets of Moscow from the outside of the car, Ryudo couldn't help but feel that it was an eye-opener. It was almost 6 o'clock in the evening, but the sky in Moscow was still clear. After all, in a city in such a geographical location, it would only get dark after 8 or 9 o'clock, so it was still possible to enjoy the scenery at this time. The capital of the Northern Kingdom, Moscow, was a city with a mix of many classical architectural styles, such as Byzantine architecture, classical architecture, Baroque architecture, etc. But generally, it used highly contrasting red bricks, green tiles, and roof decorations to make the buildings bright. The streets were filled with hairy bear men, their mouths filled with the taste of vodka. The men were generally big, round, and had robust faces, while the women were very beautiful and fat. It made people sigh that although hairy bear men were beautiful, it was a pity that they were easy to gain weight. The streets were filled with authentic exotic buildings and numerous commercial shops. From time to time, 3 to 5 strong men could be seen drinking vodka in the cold wind of single-digit temperatures, perfectly displaying the valiant temperament of the city. As the car slowly moved forward, the group came to the place where Ryuto and Dunya were going to live, the Moscow Four Seasons Hotel, which was located directly across from the Kremlin. The Red Square area where the Kremlin was located had always been the historical, geographical, and religious center of Moscow, and the top destination for tourists. No matter the season, one could see the cobblestone ground, the majestic fortress, and the dreamy St. Basil's Church. Of course, the best Moscow Four Seasons Hotel in Moscow was located near the Red Square. It was a Moscow hotel that had been in business for nearly 100 years, so it was one of the best 5-star hotels. Then, the meeting with Yakov is set for tomorrow at noon. Please have a good rest here tonight. I won't disturb you. After sending Ryuto and Dunya to the door of the luxurious presidential suite on the top floor of the Four Seasons Hotel, Ixien bowed slightly and left, leaving only a few members of the Big Dipper Alliance to guard the door. Phew, I'm really tired. Don't you think so? After returning to the room, Ryuto unconsciously lay down on the large double bed, as if he couldn't wait to lie down and sleep until tomorrow. Originally, Ryuto thought that this trip to Moscow was just a simple fight with Mao Xiong. Who would have thought that it would involve the manufacturing process of the sixth demon's wrath, a weapon that could destroy a country? As for Iam's plan to use nuclear weapons to wipe out Japan, Ryuto originally didn't want to interfere. However, his entire family was in Yodo, and his 3 harem, and the 3 major forces behind them were also in Yodo. He couldn't just ignore it. If Iam really did use a hydrogen bomb, Ryuto could take Colored Glaze, Yunyan, Dunya, and Rue Hui and escape, but he couldn't take everyone from the Rulong group and the Black Hand Alliance with him. At least before the threat of nuclear weapons was confirmed, even with Ryuto's identity and status, it was impossible for everyone around him to escape to another country. After all, it was hard to believe that a major force was preparing to create a nuclear weapon to wipe out Japan. Unless Iam really used the sixth demon's wrath, then others would believe Ryuto's words and escape with Ryuto. But no matter what, Ryuto and Iam were mortal enemies. If they could stop their mortal enemy from creating the sixth demon's wrath, it would be the best. That was why Ryuto transferred the elite members of the Rulong Security Company over. Although there were only 100 people in the special forces named Dragon Teeth, they were all transferred from the original Dragon Group and then sent to the Middle East battlefield to undergo more than half a year of thorough militarized special training to build the team. With the best coach, the toughest environment, and the best equipment, the Dragon Fong was created by combining these elements. Although it was slightly inferior to Yongji's Conquering the World, in terms of combat ability, it was not too far behind. It could already be regarded as a first-class special force. However, the arrival of the Dragon Fong and the confrontation with the Tomahawk would be tomorrow. In order to prepare for tomorrow's chaos, Ryuto needed a good rest today. In addition, he woke up early in the morning and took more than 10 hours of plane and car travel, so he was already very tired. Obviously, Ryuto was not the only one who felt tired. Dunya, who was traveling with him, also looked a little pale. She walked to the bed listlessly and laid down on it. But after lying on the bed, Dunya realized that Ryuto was lying on the same bed as her. So she turned her head and said in a muffled voice, "Hey, go back to your own room. This is my bed." "Go back to my own? Wait, I don't have a room here. Did that fellow Ixien only book one room?" Speaking of this, Ryuto realized that this luxurious presidential suite seemed to be only a double room. So he quickly went out to communicate with his subordinates outside and asked them to book another room for him. But a few minutes later, the subordinate hurried back and awkwardly said that the Four Seasons Hotel Moscow was full, and there were no vacant rooms. If he wanted a room, he would have to change to another hotel. So troublesome. Forget it. I'll just squeeze with Dunya for one night. After returning to the room, Dunya had already taken off her shoes and socks, revealing a pair of petite and smooth jade feet. She was lying on the bed in a daze. Seeing Ryudo come back, she asked without turning her head, "Is the room ready?" "No, just squeeze with me tonight." "Squeeze? Are you kidding me? Who wants to sleep in the same room with you?" Suddenly, Dunya frowned and said in a very dissatisfied tone. But when he heard this, Ryudo's doubts in his heart became heavier. "Who wants to sleep in the same room with me? Is this something a human would say? Have you never slept with me before?" Although a few months have passed, Ryudo also believed that Dunya would not really forget that night when she was infected by the hell butterfly. Ryudo lay next to her and slept for a night. Why could she sleep in the same room with Ryudo a few months ago, but not now? With a puzzled expression, Ryudo climbed back onto the bed and asked, "Then you have to explain why you can't sleep in the same room with me. Who are you to me? Why can you sleep in the same room with me? Who am I to you? According to what your father said, we should be engaged, right? Then what's the problem with sleeping in the same room?" "Humph. It was you who said that you can't treat me as a woman. And now you have the nerve to say such words, how shameless." When she remembered what Ryudo said to her father, Dunya could not help but clench her teeth and cover her head with a pillow. "I can't treat her as a woman? Ah, so that's why. Did you hear what I said to Wu Hong?" Hearing this, Ryudo could not help but pat his head. Only now did he understand why Dunya was so strange for 2 consecutive days. Last night, when Ryudo was forced to marry by Wu Hong, he said, "I just can't treat her as a woman. You know, she has a good figure and a good temperament." These words should have been secretly heard by Dunya. How to put it? These words were mainly to express his desire to not marry Dunya so soon. But it did not mean that Ryudo did not like Dunya. Did Ryudo like Dunya? Of course he liked her. But did Ryudo want to treat her as a woman? Not for the time being. After all, if he wanted to treat Dunya as a woman, then he would inevitably have a desire for her body. If Dunya was a carnivorous woman like Yunyan, or a smart person like Colored Glaze, then it would be fine. The problem was that Dunya really did not know anything. Until now, Dunya, who had just reached adulthood, did not know what strange things could happen when a man and woman were together. This innocence and ignorance was her weakness, but also her greatest strength. Because of this, Ryudo could feel relaxed when he was with Dunya. The two of them did not have any misgivings or barriers when interacting with each other, just like a pair of best friends of opposite sexes, not a pair of lovers. Next, they only needed to wait for 1 or 2 years. When Dunya grew a little older, her female consciousness would begin to awaken, and she would not be so ignorant. Then, the two of them would be able to move past the stage of best friends and towards the realm of lovers, or even husband and wife. This was the best and most natural process. In this way, Ryudo would not have to personally destroy Dunya's innocence in advance. It would feel like he was tarnishing her feelings. But what Ryudo did not expect was that his conversation with Wu Hong seemed to have accidentally awakened Dunya's female consciousness in advance. That conversation even gave her the illusion that she was a woman without charm, and that was why Ryudo did not want to marry her. After understanding the ins and outs of everything, Ryudo could only smile bitterly beside Dunya. He laughed and said, "My lady, so you were angry at me for 2 days because of this matter. You should have said so earlier. Let me die a quick death." There's nothing to say. Anyway, even if you don't see me as a woman, I'm still a mature woman. A mature woman cannot sleep in the same room as you, so please. Seeing that Dunya still had the attitude of, "Since you look down on me, then don't touch me," Ryudo decisively flipped over on the bed and pressed this mature woman under his body. After realizing that someone was on top of her, Dunya hurriedly threw away the pillow and shouted at Ryudo, who was using his hands to support himself on the bed. What are you doing? Didn't you say that you are a mature woman? Then you should know what kind of hospitality a mature woman would receive when she is with her fiancé, right? Speaking until here, Ryuto grinned and slowly leaned his head down. Chapter 282. The speed at which Longdo's head lowered was very, very slow. This allowed Dunya to clearly feel that the warm aura was approaching her. Moreover, if they continued to get close to each other, the result would be their lips being pressed together. Wait. This. Dunya didn't expect Ryuto to do this, so her little face suddenly turned red, and her body slightly trembled. But, damn it, don't look down on me. But in order to show her maturity as a mature woman, Dunya didn't turn away. Instead, she forced herself to pout and prepared to throw her first kiss. Chirp. But in the next moment, Ryuto's head slid up, and his lips kissed Dunya's forehead. When she realized that this guy kissed her forehead, Dunya's trembling finally stopped, as if she was suddenly relieved. Don't be stubborn. After feeling the girl's embarrassment, Ryuto turned over and lay down on the side and laughed. You're not ready at all. Among the three harem, Dunya was obviously the most afraid of this kind of thing, because she was ignorant about the relationship between men and women, and fear came from the unknown. But the other two women weren't like this. Colored Glaze took the initiative to force a kiss, and Yunyan took the initiative to seduce and ask for a kiss. In comparison, Dunya, who was trembling like a little rabbit about to be eaten by a big bad wolf, was indeed not ready. After realizing this point, Dunya was speechless, because she couldn't refute this point. This is also the reason why I don't plan to marry you so soon. As Ryuto said, he reached out and stroked Dunya's waterfall-like silver hair, as if he was stroking this little bear's fur. In a relationship between a man and a woman, both sides must be ready. If you're not ready, and I force you, it will only cause you to be traumatized, and you won't be able to fully devote yourself to it in the future. Understand? Unlike usual, Ryuto's tone was very serious, and obviously he wasn't teasing. Although Ryuto was a pervert who liked women, and even prepared to start a harem, he had always been the type of person who liked both sides, and he hated torrents and forced people the most. If he couldn't make his woman be willing to be intimate with him, then even if he got her, it would be meaningless. Dunya was in such a situation. Hearing this, Dunya couldn't help but raise her head slightly, looked at Ryuto's serious expression that was different from usual, and asked, Then, what about Colored Glaze and Yunyan? Have you been intimate with them? About that I have, but not completely. Ryuto didn't hide his relationship with Colored Glaze and Yunyan to Dunya. In the past few months, he often went out with the two, and it was normal for them to be intimate and hug each other. After all, this was a relationship that naturally happened when love was strong. However, this kind of intimacy stopped there, because Yunyan's father, Kyoji, had recently returned, and Yunyan had also returned to the Tsukuminari villa to stay with her family, so Ryuto didn't have the chance to go further with her. As for Colored Glaze, there was no need to mention it. Ruehui had repeatedly warned him not to take Colored Glaze's virginity, so Ryuto didn't have the guts to make a move on her for the time being. So from the current situation, Ryuto, Colored Glaze, and Yunyan had only reached B in ABC, and the final C hadn't arrived yet. After listening to this explanation, Dunya was first stunned, then a feeling of not wanting to admit defeat slowly rose in her heart. During this period, Dunya more or less developed a sense of competition for the two women, because she actually saw Ryuto being intimate with Yunyan and Colored Glaze. The scene where Ryuto and Yunyan were intimate was in school. At that time, it was still lunch break on the rooftop. Ryuto and Yunyan often ate there, and Dunya sometimes also went to join in the fun. Just a week ago, Dunya forgot to bring food, so she went to the welfare department to buy a bunch of bread, and hurriedly ran to the rooftop. Who knew that when she opened the door, she would hear such a voice? Don't mess around, we're in school. What are you afraid of? No one will come here. Hee, I think so. MMM. Hearing the two's conversation, Dunya quietly slipped to the door and opened it a crack, widening her eyes to look inside, and saw the extremely shocking scene. Ryudo and Yunyin were hugging and kissing by the wall. That action was really too shameless, at least in Dunya's eyes. The two old foxes made out with each other for a full 5 minutes before letting go. Dunya, who was hiding behind the door, blushed. After all, this was the first time she had seen such a thrilling reality show. So, they would do this kind of thing in private? But when she thought of Yunyin's mature behavior and age of graduation, Dunya comforted herself by thinking, it's okay, Yunyin is special, as long as it's not with colored glaze. But who knew, a few days later, Dunya saw Ryudo and colored glaze being sweet in the Rulong Group headquarters. It was a green bamboo forest. That day, school was on holiday, so Dunya came to look for Ryudo to play, but she didn't expect that someone was already one step ahead of her. Miss Colored Glaze, it's been hard for you to manage the Black Hand Alliance. You just found out. My shoulders are sore now, massage them properly, okay? Under the gaze of Dunya, who was hiding in the dark, Colored Glaze sat under the shade of the bamboo forest and let someone massage her shoulders. But as they pressed against each other, they somehow ended up kissing each other. They kissed for a full 5 minutes before letting go. If Yunyin and Ryudo had such intimate actions, it would be fine, but Colored Glaze was also here. And she didn't feel any more distant than Yunyin. Seeing the two of them hugging and whispering after kissing, Dunya, who was secretly watching from afar, felt her eyes burning. She felt that there was a patch of lush green above her head, just like the Hilumber Plains. Speaking of which, Dunya definitely liked Ryudo. But just as Ryudo thought, she could accept playing around with Ryudo, and even sleeping together. But she couldn't accept such intimate actions. But after seeing Yunyin and Liuli open a new door one after another, Dunya felt like she was a pitiful creature who had been thrown outside the door. She could only watch the three of them being intimate with each other. That feeling was terrible. As the saying goes, don't worry about scarcity, but worry about inequality. She was already holding back her anger after seeing Ryudo being intimate with Yunyin and Colored Glaze. Then, Ryudo said those words that seemed to be mocking her for not being feminine. So it was no wonder that Dunya was so angry. So she reached out and grabbed Ryudo's collar and asked seriously, let me ask you a question. Am I really not feminine? It's okay, as long as you're lowly. Lowly? What the hell is lowly? The moment she heard this, Dunya couldn't help but explode. That's the feeling. But Ryudo smiled and pulled her into his arms and said with a smile, it doesn't matter whether you're feminine or not. What's important is that you're very cute, very pure, and very straightforward. This is your unique taste, and I like you very much. You don't have to compare other things with Yunyin and Colored Glaze. I'm cute, very pure, very straightforward. After being held in the arms of this man and being caressed on the back, and hearing these obviously great compliments, Dunya's face suddenly turned red, and her slightly stiff body also became soft. It had to be said that although Ryudo's nerves were thick, with his current high IQ, it wasn't difficult for him to coax a mere Dunya. After a few words of coaxing and a hug, the girl's little face that had been pulled down suddenly relaxed, and her temperament gradually changed back to that of a cute and lively little lowly. But even so, she still raised her head and asked, do you really think that I'm good like this? Of course it's good, this little face is so cute. But I want to be better. I don't want to lose to Colored Glaze and Yunyin. I want to be the best in your heart. Perhaps it was because she was in her hometown, or perhaps it was because of the change in her mentality. Dunya unconsciously spoke her mind. Which girl didn't want to be the best in their lover's heart? Although Colored Glaze, Yunyin, and Dunya had basically accepted the situation of the three women coexisting, they naturally had their own little plans in their hearts, and they all hoped that Ryudo would favor only one of them. Although she hadn't officially become Ryudo's lover, Dunya still had such thoughts, so she had been troubled over how to let Ryudo feel her personal charm. Is that so? That's really great. Ryudo heard this and revealed a happy smile, then asked, then what does the lovely Dunya plan to do? Hee. Ryudo was actually just casually asking, who knew that Dunya directly got up from the bed, put on her shoes and socks, and took out a small package from the suitcase. Let's go, let's go. After taking out the small package, Dunya pulled Ryuto up from the bed and walked straight to the door. Go? Where are we going? To a place where I can show my personal charm. A place where you can show your personal charm. The zoo. You're looking for death. Don't you know how to talk? What the hell is a zoo? Puff. Suddenly, Dunya couldn't help but punch Ryuto's stomach, and he almost spat out the Russian-style cream bun he just ate. However, although he was beaten, Ryuto's mood was still very good, because the awkward Dunya from before was gone, and the cute headless silver bear was back. In this way, although he didn't know where Dunya was taking him, Ryuto smiled and followed behind, wanting to see what kind of surprise this girl was going to bring him. Chapter 283. Dunya dragged Zhang Zian to a restaurant for dinner. It was already nighttime. As night fell, the two of them walked on the streets of Moscow. Not long after, a majestic building appeared in front of them. Anyone who lived in Moscow knew that this was the Moscow Lavsky Music Theater, built during the pre-Soviet period. It was one of the most famous theaters in Moscow. The Moscow Lavsky Ballet Troupe, which resided in this theater, was one of the top ballet troupes in the Northern Kingdom and even the world. Ever since their chief dancer, Overa Kaldis, retired more than 10 years ago, the ballet company's reputation was not as enthusiastic as before. However, it was still full of people every time it performed. It was known as the representative of the highest level of ballet in Moscow. It was now past 9 o'clock. Since there were no performances scheduled in the theater today, there were few lights in the theater. There were not many pedestrians nearby, so it seemed empty and quiet. From the outside, the Lavsky Theater was a typical Baroque architecture. The pink brick walls and the decorative columns set off each other. On the one hand, one could strongly feel the traditional historical traces and rich cultural heritage. At the same time, the overly complicated texture and decoration were abandoned, and the unnecessary cumbersome lines were simplified. In the courtyard outside the theater, there were recently posted promotional posters for the performance. In the posters, handsome men and beautiful women in beautiful ballet costumes were posing in various elegant postures. It was as if one would be immersed in the wonderful performance at a glance. After arriving at the entrance of the theater, Dunya tilted her head at Ryuto. She did not walk to the gate guarded by the guards. Instead, she went to a corner not far away, grabbed a water pipe, and threw herself nearly 5 meters up. From a third person's point of view, Dunya's move just now was like flying. She flew lightly to the balcony on the second floor, grabbed the railing and flipped up. Almost in the blink of an eye, she arrived at the rooftop of the third floor. Ever since she was poisoned by the hell butterfly a few months ago, and gained a level 5 superhuman physique, Dunya's skills had been rapidly developing in a direction that was unlike that of a human. She had even tried to climb the 200-meter-high Tokyo Emperor Hotel with her bare hands. With only 2 fingers, she could support her body weight of nearly 150 kilograms. As if she was a young Spider-Man who moved the wall at a right angle, as if it were flat ground. Seeing Dunya suddenly jumping over the wall, Ryuto also jumped over the wall and entered the theater from the top of the third floor. Was this the place Dunya wanted to bring me to? She seemed familiar with this place. While Dunya moved forward with familiarity, Ryuto, who was following behind, curiously observed the scene inside the theater. On the other hand, he was curious about Dunya's goal. The interior color scheme of this Moscow Lavsky Music Theater was Mediterranean-style blue and white. It looked very fresh and comfortable, making people feel as if they were rippling in a wonderful art sea. Soon, the two quietly came to the theater's main stage, which was the most important area of the theater. Because today was a closed day, there was no one on the main stage, and the lights were not turned on. Dunya, on the other hand, went to the main stage and turned on the lights, letting the spotlights above illuminate the dark world. Whoa, this is so beautiful. When the lights were turned on, Ryuto couldn't help but show a surprised expression, because this was the first time he saw such a beautiful theater. The main stage of Moscow Lavsky Music Theater could only be considered medium-sized in terms of scale. There were hundreds of chairs on the first floor and the second floor respectively. The chairs were arranged in a semicircle around the stage, looking like a huge fish pond. Compared to the simple and elegant main color scheme, the huge stage curtain was extremely luxurious. The luxurious dark gold color and the theater's royal blue color were mixed together, presenting an impressive stage view. Wait here for a while, I'll be right there. After putting Ryudo in the empty first row of the auditorium, Dunya took her small bag and walked to the small side door next to the stage. That was where the actors went on stage. Naturally, there was no one inside the actors' lounge. Actors' lounge? No way. Is Dunya going to dance for me? Lin Sanjia thought. Looking at the girl taking a small bag and walking over there, Ryudo couldn't help but think of Dunya's background. Her mother, Olivia Caldas, was a world-famous ballet artist. Logically, Dunya should be a girl with artistic genes. But he didn't know if it was because Wu Hong's fighting genes were too strong. Although Dunya inherited her mother's beauty, she had almost no artistic achievements. The ballet that her mother was proud of also had not been performed for a long time. So does Dunya still know how to dance? He didn't know. At least in the original Red album too. No one survived. She didn't dance in front of the player. But now that Dunya deliberately brought Ryudo back to the place where her mother became famous, it seemed like she wanted to prove something to Ryudo. In this kind of curious and excited waiting, it didn't take long before a particularly eye-catching figure, under the stage lights, finally appeared in front of Ryudo. Of this is. When he saw Dunya, who purposely changed into a ballet dress, Ryudo almost exclaimed because she looked so beautiful right now. The tight-fitting ice blue ballet dress perfectly depicted the beautiful and slender figure of a 16-year-old girl. The short skirt that was as thin as a cicada's wings, when moving, was graceful and light like a blooming flower. Together with the white silk pants and pointed shoes that highlighted her slender legs, it was even more beautiful. At this time, the girl standing in the middle of the stage elegantly raised her neck slightly, like a swan proudly swearing an oath. Her silver silk-like shiny hair was tied into a mature ponytail behind her back. Then the girl stretched her arms, tiptoed, and before Ryudo could react, she had already started dancing. There was only the girl on the huge and empty stage, and there was no music or dance accompaniment. She just moved her graceful body according to the rhythm in her heart, like a silver-white butterfly fluttering in the air, or like a leaf swaying in the air. Of course, Dunya knew how to dance. How could she not know how to dance? She was the daughter of Elvira Caldas, the continuation of the life of a lady who deeply engraved art and elegance into her bones. She was born to be a dancer. So light. Her body was so light, as if she could do anything easily. Although Dunya hadn't danced for a long time, her exaggerated physical fitness brought about strong control that perfectly covered up her unfamiliarity. She was dancing in the middle of the dance floor. Her beautiful dance was graceful and gentle. Her body was as light as the wind, and her posture was wonderful beyond compare. Her agile toes danced elegantly in the air, as if time and space were blurred, making the theater return to the time when the Princess of the North was still present. If there were old audiences who had seen Elvira's dance in the past, when they saw the situation on the stage, they would definitely be shocked to the point of tears. Not only did the girl have a graceful dance, but her dance skills were still moving even though she wasn't skilled. Her temperament was comparable to that of an angel, and it almost perfectly restored Elvira's posture. She lightly tapped her toes, and her slender feet drew an arc on the floor, as if there were layers of ripples in the water. Then, she raised her hands high above her head, slightly closed, and twirled her fingers, like a budding flower that was slowly blooming. Finally, the girl tapped her feet and stood upright, taking small steps, and suddenly jumped. Through a high jump of 720 degrees, she displayed the beauty of the flowing lines in the circle to her heart's content. After this high jump, the girl's speed became faster and faster, and her movements became more and more intense. It even gradually went beyond the category of dance and evolved into martial arts. Every time her slender feet touched the ground, it would create a strong wind, as if it was going to sweep a ditch on the ground. When her slender waist and arms stretched back gracefully, it was as if the air on the stage was about to disperse. Even so, it still wasn't martial arts, because if these movements were called martial arts, it would be too elegant, and people would unknowingly be intoxicated by it. In this world, where would there be a martial arts that people couldn't take their eyes off, as if their hearts were spinning along with it? But in this world, where would there be such a dance that was full of power and speed, as if it could shatter the dance floor in the next moment? Movement and stillness, elegance and wildness, harmony and violence, these completely opposite essences. As Dunia's body continued to dance in the middle of the stage, and people could feel the strange beauty of countless contradictions colliding and merging together. This was a ballet, and it wasn't a ballet. This was a martial arts performance, and it wasn't a martial arts performance. This was a performance, and it wasn't a performance. This was a duel, and it wasn't a duel. What was this? Dunia herself didn't know, but this was her. This was the daughter of the princess of the Northern Kingdom, and the warrior of the Far East, showing her most beautiful, most authentic, and most charming self in front of the man she cared about the most. Too beautiful. When Dunia finished her dance and walked towards the audience, Ryudo was still immersed in her beautiful figure and elegant temperament, especially compared to the careless and boorish Dunia, who was usually careless and rude. Right now, her body was exuding a strange beauty with a strong contrast. It was the perfect embodiment of a young girl's soul-stirring charm. How is it? Now do I have the charm of a woman? After coming to Ryudo's side, Dunia shook her sweat-stained hair and asked in a confident tone. Yes, too many. Seeing Dunia like this, for the first time, Ryudo had the urge to hug her tightly, kiss her, and completely dominate this little princess. And in the next second, he did just that. Chapter 284. Before Dunia could react, a large hand had already wrapped around her slender waist and pulled her body into his embrace. In the next second, the girl's body, which was wrapped in a tight dance dress, was pressed against Ryudo's body. Their cheeks were also very close. The stage's spotlight almost couldn't shine on the audience, so Ryudo and Dunia were in a slightly dim space. After pulling Dunia closer, Ryudo held her slender waist with one hand and placed the other hand on her beautiful back. A beautiful and charming back must be snow-white and well-proportioned. The back of Dunia's ballet dress was half hollowed out, through which one could feel the beautiful and smooth texture of her back. For the first time, Ryudo felt such a strong charm from the girl's body. After her unique outfit and the special dance just now, Dunia seemed to have sublimated, becoming the most fascinating combination of angel and demon under the spotlight. Especially at such a close distance, her beautiful and sweet face was flawless, pure to the point that it didn't contain any impurities. Her skin was as white as snow, and her plump and delicate little mouth was slightly open, emitting an alluring aura. This beautiful scene really made Ryudo's blood boil. He didn't care that they were still in the theater, but he couldn't help but lean down and kiss Dunia's soft and smooth cherry lips. With this kiss, Dunia's eyes suddenly widened, but there wasn't much surprise in her eyes. Instead, there was a strange mixture of excitement and accomplishment. Very good, just like that. You bastard, didn't you say I wasn't charming? How about now? You still took the initiative to kiss me. But this feeling is pretty good. Perhaps it was because of the experience on the stage where her mother performed. Dunia's mentality was completely different, and she was a lot calmer when facing Ryudo's kiss. Then she closed her eyes, pursed her lips, and focused her attention on where their bodies touched. For Dunia, this was the first time she had experienced such a wonderful feeling. She immediately felt her body heat up, and her mind buzzed. It was as if her body was gradually floating up into the clouds, weightless and weightless. After training with Yunyin and colored glaze for so long, Ryudo's experience in kissing was quite rich, and it was easy for him to get Dunia, who was a newbie, into the zone. As the two kissed, the girl couldn't help but start to respond, and her soft and delicate body also began to twist restlessly in his arms. After kissing for a while, Ryudo noticed that his hands had unknowingly become a little restless, so he quickly pushed Dunya's body away, and then said apologetically, "I'm sorry. It seems a little too much." For Dunya, who was not very proficient in kissing might be the limit of her endurance, and it might be a little too early for other things. However, what Ryudo didn't expect was that after being pushed away, Dunya leaned over again and chuckled in his ear. "Why do you think it's too much? Aren't we engaged? You should continue to treat me with hospitality, my dear." If Ryudo remembered correctly, these were the words he said on the bed in the luxurious suite of the Four Seasons Hotel in Moscow not long ago. At that time, Dunya was trembling when she heard these words. She was scared like a little mouse caught by a cat. But now she took the initiative to say these words in Ryudo's ear, and she even looked forward to it. Ryudo naturally knew the deeper meaning contained in these words. Could it be? When he thought of the meaning of hospitality, Ryudo couldn't help but feel a little thirsty, but he still said with a wry smile, "Why, don't tell me you want more." "Can't I? The feeling just now was really good, so it's normal for me to want to experience more." "Experience more? You can't just say that." "I'm not saying that. The next thing, how about we go back to the room? Or do you prefer here?" "I'm fine with anything." Perhaps because this was her hometown, the land of Moscow where the people were tough, Dunya couldn't help but become bold tonight, and she drove the car on the highway. F***CK. Although Ryudo was not a hungry ghost, in this kind of environment, he couldn't help but feel a strong emotion in his heart. So he immediately put his arm around Dunya's legs, which were wrapped in white silk stockings, and carried the girl in his arms, running out of the Moscow Lavsky Music Theater as fast as he could. Speaking of which, this music theater was actually not far from the hotel where they lived. Ryudo carried Dunya and rushed to the third-floor rooftop like lightning, and then directly jumped down from the third floor without looking. He stepped on the billboard on the street and landed lightly. Under his rapid run, it didn't take long for the two to return to the door of the luxurious suite where they lived. After sending away the several guards here, Ryudo, before entering the door, gasped and asked the girl in her ear, "If you go in now, there's no turning back. Are you sure you want to do this?" "Puff, don't be like an old woman. Are you a man?" Suddenly Dunya, who was leaning on Ryudo, didn't know whether to laugh or cry, as if she was amused by his nagging. "Am I a man?" Hearing this, Ryudo couldn't stand it anymore. After all, this was a matter of dignity, and there was no room for doubt. So he said fiercely in Dunya's ear, "Whether I am a man or not, you will know in a while." Oh, I'm so scared, hee. Hey, there is really someone who is not afraid of death." After hearing the bell-like laughter, Ryudo immediately opened the door with the key card and rushed inside with the girl in his arms. Dong. As the door was quickly closed from the inside, the thick and heavy door seemed to separate the inside and outside of the room into two worlds. The outside world continued with the noise and chaos of the Moscow night. In the cold winter air, the smell of vodka mixed with ice and snow drifted as usual. And in the small world in the room, it exuded the gorgeous feeling of spring and the hot atmosphere of summer. 3,000 words are omitted. Early the next morning, a crimson light began to penetrate the clouds. Light appeared on the edge of the clouds, and the cold morning breeze of Moscow blew through the streets, representing the arrival of a new day. For Long Do, this morning was different from all the other mornings in the past. This was because when he opened his eyes, what he saw was not the familiar ceiling, but beautiful silvery hair. Is it Dunya? Ryudo looked down and saw the girl in his arms was still sleeping. Her small head was resting on Ryudo's shoulder, and her rose-like lips seemed to be a bit swollen. Red marks could be seen on her swan-like slender neck, and her messy silver hair was scattered on the delicate velvet quilt. She looked really miserable, but in the end this hospitality was requested by Dunya, and she also enjoyed it, so there was nothing to be pitiful about. Speaking of which, she was really strong last night. She actually, admirable. Thinking about the specific scene of the battle, Ryudo couldn't help but nod. But at this time, Dunya next to him also closed her eyes cutely, and then slowly woke up. You woke up. After discovering that his adorable little princess had woken up, Longdo smiled and lowered his head to give her a light kiss on her forehead. This action was very doting. I don't know why, but when I see your face early in the morning, I feel like punching someone. After waking up, the first thing Dunya did was to reach out and pinch Ryudo's face. Then, she crawled out of the quilt and faced the morning sun to stretch, while Ryudo teased, "Why do you feel like punching someone? Didn't you like me last night? Bah, shameless. Go to the side and stay there." Dong Mia couldn't help but make a face at Longdo, who was still pretending to be obedient after taking advantage of her. Then, she quickly washed up and changed her clothes. She sat in front of the dressing table and combed her messy silver hair. This hair is really messy, because she didn't take care of it before going to bed last night. Dunya's hair was already tangled into a mess, making it difficult for her to comb it. But just when she was feeling annoyed, a pair of big hands deftly took the comb from behind and gently combed the girl's hair. You really know how to express yourself at the right time. When she sat in front of the mirror and looked at Ryudo combing her hair with the silver comb, Dunya suddenly didn't know whether to laugh or cry. There's nothing to express. I'm just combing my fiancé's hair. Isn't this a very normal thing? Longdo couldn't help but slowly stroke her hair, as he felt the soft and cold sensation of a silver waterfall on his hand. Tisk sly guy. What did you say? I said, you always like to make people's heart beat faster, you're too sly. Just when Dunya was enjoying her lover's morning makeup, she suddenly saw her flat stomach in the mirror, and her face suddenly turned red. Wait, I suddenly thought of a question. What question? Yesterday we did that, will I get pregnant? Of course it's possible, but it's okay, I'll take responsibility. After hearing Dunya's words, Ryudo smiled and patted her little head. Chapter 285. Because both of them were in a hurry last night, and because they didn't have any experience, they didn't even think about taking precautions. They stepped on the gas pedal as soon as they got on the highway. They only remembered the fear when they woke up the next morning. However, compared to the blushing Dunya, Ryudo was obviously much calmer when talking about this issue. After all, the two were engaged. Whether Dunya was pregnant or not, Ryudo would marry her in a year or two, so it wasn't a big problem whether her belly was bloated or not. Of course, if Dunya came back with a bloated belly after going to Moscow with Ryudo, he would probably be scolded, beaten by Colored Glaze and Yunyan. But that was Ryudo's own business. It had nothing to do with Dunya. After expressing his promise again, Longdo picked up a beautiful ribbon and tied Dunya's hair into a ponytail, which was a ponytail that a young girl usually did not tie. What's this hairstyle? Why did you make it look like this? Dunya looked at herself in the mirror. It was obviously different from her usual twin ponytails. It looked more intellectual and more mature. Dunya asked curiously, "This is the standard wife hairstyle. You have now added the wife attribute, so you can wear this hairstyle. Is this guy crazy? What the hell is the wife attribute?" After a sigh, Dunya slowly stood up from the dressing chair, then turned her head and said with a smile, "What do you think? Do I look good?" After dressing up neatly and changing into a married woman's style, Dunya really looked like a woman full of charm, as if she had matured a lot all of a sudden. However, this was just a matter of dressing and temperament. Her face was still that of a loli, and her body was still that of a loli. Therefore, this strong sense of wife ex loli wrapped around her body was really a feeling that made people want to explode. Yes, my fiancé is the prettiest. Looking at Dunya, who suddenly had the temperament of a wife, Ryudo couldn't help but hug her in his arms again. The two who just tasted the forbidden fruit were in the sweetest moment, so they stayed in the room for a while before going out to eat. There was the best restaurant in the Moscow Four Seasons Hotel. Even if it was just a buffet breakfast, every meal was delicious and couldn't be picky. By the way, you are going to meet the new owner of Tomahawk. Yeah, what is it? During the meal, Dunya stuffed a delicious fruit pancake with cream in her mouth and asked Ryudo, who was sitting across from her. After leaving the stage, Dunya returned to her previous carefree attitude. But if one looked carefully, it wouldn't be difficult to notice that the girl's eyes and posture had a strong sense of confidence. She was confident. For the current Dunya, she was full of confidence, and she was in a completely new state. Not only was she mature because she stepped onto a new level, but she also felt a sense of accomplishment because she won against two of her main competitors. First place. After last night, Dunya took the gold medal of the Ryudo tournament and became Ryudo's first woman. Or she thought she was the first woman. Kanzaki-colored glaze Tsuki Yunyen, from now on, you can only use things that I have used before. I really want to see what kind of reaction you will have after you find out. In this state, Dunya felt like she was awesome. Her attitude was so confident that it was surprising. It was as if she was a high and mighty queen of Versailles sitting on the throne. Yakov will have to discuss with him later. Longdo nodded when he heard that. Although he had a good night last night, Ryudo didn't forget what he came to Moscow for. In a few hours he had to go to the Tomahawk headquarters to talk with the new leader, Yakov, about the organization's exorbitant demand for the Big Dipper Alliance. Looking at Dunya, who was stuffing her fifth plate of pancakes into her mouth, Ryudo smiled. What, do you want to come? Nonsense. Let me be your bodyguard. I guarantee that no one will be able to hurt you. Hearing this, Dunya showed a joyful smile. Then she tightened her grip on the fork, and the thick steel fork was twisted into an indescribable strange shape. The hard steel was like plasticine in Dunya's hands. After all, this young lady had level 5 constitution and was one of the top monsters in the world. Her strength was even comparable to Ryudo when he was in the Tao realm. Because he knew how terrifying Dunya's strength was, Ryudo didn't stop her from going with him. However, before going to the Tomahawk headquarters, he had to give Dunya some equipment. Although Dunya's physical strength was almost at the limit of a human, she could still be injured by some firearms, such as submachine guns or bombs. Therefore, after the two finished their meal and returned to the room, Ryudo began to act like Doraemon. He took out a bunch of special equipment and handed it to Dunya to change into. The first thing Ryudo took out was a seemingly light rubber jumpsuit. However, when she held it in her hand, she could feel its weight. The jumpsuit looked a bit like a special jumpsuit, but instead of rubber, it was made with some kind of opaque gel. It looked a bit strange. The moment she saw the jumpsuit, Dunya was stunned. After a while, she asked strangely, You want me to wear this? Is this some kind of special interest? What are you thinking? After reaching out and patting Dunya's head, Ryudo smiled and hung the strange jumpsuit on the bedspread. Then, he reached out with his right hand, and a special Bauer heavy assault rifle appeared in his hand. This assault rifle was a big gift from Kaiyang to Ryudo. It was one of the most powerful assault rifles in the world. It used a large caliber 9mm armor-piercing tungsten core bullet, which could directly blast through walls. Its power was not on the same level as a normal rifle. Look carefully. In front of Dunya, Ryudo directly shot at the strange gel jumpsuit hanging on the bedspread. Bang! After the shot, the jumpsuit along with the bedspread was blown away by the huge impact. However, when Ryudo went over to pick it up, he found that the jumpsuit was almost undamaged. Only there was a small white dot on it. It was directly hit by a large caliber armor-piercing bullet, but it did not penetrate. This level of protection was completely unlike the bulletproof vests of this era. Of course, in reality, this thing was not a technology that should exist in this era. It was a special equipment that Ryudo bought from the market, Rogue Gel Bulletproof Vest. The price of this bulletproof vest was as high as 100 million yuan. It was one of the more expensive items among the Rogue equipment. However, there was an advantage to being expensive, which was that this thing was very useful. According to the product description, this liquid bulletproof vest was made of sheer thickening gel. It contained special particles that could freely float. When the gel was disturbed by bullets, these special particles would collide and form a strong resistance against the disturbance. According to Ryudo's test, This gel bulletproof vest's resistance to bullets was about 5 times stronger than steel. Although it weighed 20 to 30 pounds, it would not hinder movement. It was just right for people like Dunya to wear. With Dunya's LV5 physical ability, a few dozen pounds of weight was nothing. However, after wearing this thing, she could almost ignore most firearms attacks. Unless someone directly shot at her unprotected face, they could not hurt her at all. However, with Dunya's current strength, it was easier said than done if someone wanted to hit her face with a gun. This young lady was not a target. Oh, so that's how it is. This is good. After listening to Ryuto's explanation, Dunya excitedly put on the liquid bulletproof vest. Watching a beauty undress and put on her clothes was originally a pleasure. Ryuto smiled as he watched Dunya put on the bulletproof vest. Then he continued to take out a few other special items. This time, Ryuto gave Dunya a total of 3 items. In addition to the liquid bulletproof vest, there was a pair of special Rogue pressurized gloves and Rogue turbine shoes. The gloves could greatly increase the impact of an attack and protect the hand joints from damage. Ryuto tested it before. When wearing the gloves, he could knock over a car with one punch. On the other hand, the pair of turbine shoes that looked like ordinary sports shoes could greatly increase one's speed and jumping ability. When used at full strength, one could jump from the first floor to the 3rd floor. These 2 items were originally for Ryuto's own use. Anyway, he didn't like to use his fists recently. Instead, he was obsessed with the pleasure of using various firearms. So he simply gave these items to Dunya as a reward for her efforts last night. At this time, Dunya, who wore the Rogue gel bulletproof vest, Rogue pressurized gloves, and Rogue turbine shoes, her physical ability had far exceeded the scope of human beings. She could be described as an invincible Iron Man. What about you? Don't you need to equip anything? After putting on these special items, Dunya looked at Ryuto, who had a happy expression, and asked with a somewhat curious tone. After all, they might be fighting with Tomahawk in a while. If Ryuto, the protagonist, didn't prepare enough, wouldn't it be easy for something to happen? This was not what Dunya wanted. I have a lot of equipment. It's just that you can't see it. When he heard this sentence, Ryuto smiled slightly, then smiled and opened the personal page that only he could see. After a few months, now the data on Ryuto's personal page was comparable to a god. Chapter 286. About half a year has passed since the fight with Saito. In the past half a year, Ryuto had earned a lot of money from the Black Hand Alliance and the Rulong Security Company. Later on, Mrs. Rue Hui had returned 2 billion to him. He was really rich. According to Long Do's incomplete statistics, the total amount of money he had earned in the past 6 months was at least 5 billion yuan. Later on, because of the large amount of money that came into his account, he could no longer keep track of it. More than 5 billion, what kind of concept was that? That was a level where one could really casually buy things in the shop and add points to one's personal attribute points. At this time, on the interface that Dunya could not see, Ryuto's attributes had changed. Name: Ryuto Kiryoichi, 16 attributes. Wisdom LV4, Physique LV4, Courage LV4, Insight LV4, Charm LV4. Chi opening rate: 81%. Title: Stupid Rich, obtained after spending more than 5 billion. The number of title slots will increase by 2. Stupid Rich, obtained after spending more than 500 million. The number of equipment slots will increase by 2. God of Guns, obtained after shooting more than 50,000 bullets. Man and Gun as one, Invincible. Equipment: Bauer Heavy Assault Rifle, Legendary. Nano Spider. Grappling Rope, Legendary. Dual-wielding Glock 19C Elite. RPG-32 Rocket Launcher, Elite. Super Large Grenade Box, Elite. Equipment: None Tools. Hooligan Velcro, Hooligan Analysis Mirror, Hooligan Voice Changing Mask, Hooligan Glider, Hooligan Gel Body Armor, Hooligan X-Ray Lens, Hooligan Sonic Wave Instrument Skills. Chenkuan Foundation Technique, 80%. Princess Mystery Technique, 80%. Ancient Bajikwan, 100%. Furamaki-style martial arts, 80%. Bone twisting hand, 100%. Iron bone mastery, 100%. Copper skin mastery, 100%. Parkour master, 100%. Hooligan immortality, 100%. Silent movement, 100%. Aura shield, 100%. Omnipotent driver, 100%. Firearms mastery, 100%. Total assets, 854 million renminbi. How should he describe these attributes? Just one look was enough to scare a person to death. There was no need to mention his 5 measurements. Other than charm, which he didn't spend money to upgrade to LV5, he spent 500 million on each of the other 4 attributes to upgrade them to the highest or second highest level. With LV5 physique and LV5 courage added together, he was basically at the level of a monster who could walk unhindered through a mountain of blades and a sea of flames. Even if the Heavenly Emperor came, he would still be able to beat the crap out of you. With LV4 resourcefulness and LV4 insight added together, it was enough to carry out very profound thinking and even see through the mental activities of others. After that, his chi opening rate also rose to a near-perfect level by repeatedly committing suicide to by the Qian Kuan Foundation building technique and the Empress Mystic art. However, because the last purchase of these 2 techniques was too expensive, 320 million each, he didn't buy them to the maximum for the time being. Other than these 2 books, there was also the Furamaki-style martial arts that didn't reach the maximum. Because the price of the blank skill book was also a bit expensive, he could only buy the 80% proficiency that was completely enough. Of course, other than that, most of the useful skills had already been bought to the maximum proficiency. Combined with Ryudo's LV5 physique and 81% chi opening rate, his unarmed combat strength had already reached a level that was close to invincible. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that if the current him went back to half a year ago to fight with someone who had entered the Tao, he wouldn't even need to use the hooligan does not die by bare hands to trick others. He could more or less kill them within 10 moves. The current Ryudo was this strong, at the level of a ceiling. However, compared to unarmed combat, the unlocking of the 2 titles, Stupid Guy Has a Lot of Money, and Gun God, was also a big key to increasing his combat strength. The former required more than $5 billion to obtain, but it was very useful. It could actually increase the number of titles in the title bar by 2 slots, which meant that he could equip 3 titles at the same time. The latter, on the other hand, was obtained by firing 50,000 bullets. It could upgrade the gun, a weapon that Ryudo didn't use very often, to the extreme, allowing him to wield it like an extension of his arm, and the state of one with the gun. The Gun God title, combined with the Gun Master, at full proficiency and super high insight, Ryudo could even accurately shoot a fly from 100 meters away. Moreover, the speed at which he drew his gun was also the fastest in the world. He really could be called the Gun God of this generation. Other than that, Ryudo's item bar also added a few useful special items. The Hooligan's Gel Bulletproof Vest, needless to say, it had the same effect as Dunya's, which could greatly increase one's defense. After wearing it, Ryudo's full proficiency of Bronze Skin Mastery, Iron Bone Mastery, and LV5 Physique, he could almost ignore the power of a rocket launcher. A full automatic rifle's strafing was no different from scratching an itch. The remaining Hooligan's X-ray lens and Hooligan's sonograph were also very useful items. The former could see through a certain range, such as what was in someone's cabinet, while the latter could detect the number of creatures in the surroundings through sound waves. In other words, any tricks in front of Ryudo were almost meaningless. He was like a robot with a radar on, knowing how many enemies were nearby, and also knowing what the hands under the table were doing. As for the Bauer Heavy Assault Rifle, Spider Grappling Rope, dual-wielding Glock 19C, and super large grenade box, they were all the best equipment that Kai Yang had found. These powerful weapons, together with the RPG-32 individual rocket launcher from before, formed Ryudo's current super powerful firepower system. Coupled with the God of Guns title, he could dominate the battlefield even more so than Rambo. Because of this, when Long Do found out that the mafia in Moscow dared to pick a fight with the Black Hand Alliance, his first reaction was to teach them a lesson and let them know who had the final say in this world. Just like that, when the two of them were completely prepared, they were lovey-dovey in the room for a while. Only then did they hear a knock on the door. Ryudo opened the door and found that the Big Dipper Alliance member, Yi Xian, was already waiting with a few subordinates. He bowed to the two of them and said, "Boss Tong Sheng, are you ready to go now?" "Sure. Speaking of which, where is the Tomahawk base?" "It's at 707, Old Village Street in the outskirts of Moscow. It's about half an hour's drive from here." "Okay, let's go." After hearing the address, Ryudo took out his phone from his pocket, entered the address, and sent it to someone. "That, Boss Tong Sheng? Is sister-in-law coming with us?" Before leaving, Yi Xian looked at Dunya, who was in light clothes, and couldn't help but show a surprised expression. Yesterday, when Ryudo came to Moscow with a little beauty like Dunya, Yi Xian could only understand that the boss needed someone to serve him, so he didn't think it was strange. But now they were going to negotiate with the boss of Tomahawk, which could lead to a fight at any time. Wasn't it suicide to bring such a girl there? Ryudo smiled and said, "It's okay, don't worry, she's my most trusted bodyguard." Most trusted? It can't be, right? Is Boss Tong Sheng joking? After taking another look at Dunya, who had delicate skin and delicate facial features like a doll, Yi Xian felt that it was inappropriate, but he couldn't say anything. He could only order his men to drive to the Old Village Street. While driving, Yi Xian repeatedly emphasized, "Boss Tong Sheng, the Tomahawk base we're going to is their nest. According to our previous investigation, there are 3 bases nearby, and there are at least 500 mafia members gathered in the bases. Almost all of them are armed with live ammunition, and there are also a lot of heavy firepower weapons. Oh, so, it's best not to have a conflict with Yakov, or else it's really difficult to protect the two of you with our manpower." Speaking until here, Yi Xian couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. After all, when he knew that Ryudo was going to negotiate with Yakov, he was almost scared to death by the young leader of the Black Hand Alliance. In Yi Xian's view, this was a stupid move to put his life in the hands of others. If Yakov only wanted to extort some money, it was fine. But if the two sides really couldn't come to an agreement and fought, and Ryudo died here, then Yi Xian didn't know how to face the boss of Mizar. But unlike Yi Xian's worried expression, Ryudo just smiled and didn't say anything, because this small problem didn't exist in his view. In the end, Ryudo didn't want to deal with the mere Tomahawk, but the weapons department of the Heavenly Eye Group that might fish in troubled waters. Compared to that huge organization, Tomahawk was simply a group of small fries baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. They didn't pose any threat to Ryudo. Just like this, in Yi Xian's fearful thoughts, the car slowly drove to the outskirts of Moscow and stopped in front of a very peaceful-looking villa. This was a 3-story villa built in the forest. The villa was surrounded by thick walls that even trucks would have a hard time breaking through. It looked like a military building. Even from afar, one could see that inside and outside the villa, there were all kinds of assault rifles, shotguns, hunting rifles, and other weapons in their hands patrolling. It was a completely austere atmosphere, and before Ryudo and Dunya entered through the main door, he ordered Yi Xian, "You guys wait outside. If there are gunshots inside, don't come in, immediately retreat, understand?" "Ah, this Boss Tong Sheng? You guys plan to go in with just 2 people?" At this time, Yi Xian's face became even paler, but he still tried to persuade. "Wait, Boss Tong Sheng, do you speak Russian? At least bring me along as a translator, right? Otherwise, how can you?" "It's okay." But before he finished speaking, Dunya, a native of the Northern Kingdom, said with a smile in Russian that was much more fluent than his, "You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.